Marry him and you'll be cut off," my parents said. 3 years later, they showed up with $40,000 in gifts when my sister couldn't have kids. Marry him and you'll be cut off. 3 years later, I was glowing with joy and life. And they came crawling back. I didn't need their apology, just closure. I'm 28, female, and 3 years ago, when I married Luke, 30, male, my family shunned me. Since then, we haven't spoken. Luke and I had been dating for 2 years before we decided to marry. My parents never loved him, therefore they were strongly opposed to embracing him as a member of the family, as their son-in-law. The rationale for this was rather shallow. It was because Luke did not come from the same background as us. Luke's father worked as a high school janitor, and his mother stayed at home to care for him and his 2 younger brothers. Money was always tight, and Luke was unable to attend college since he needed to begin working immediately after graduating from high school to support his family. When I met him, he was working as a warehouse worker at a nearby office complex. I'd regularly see him during my lunch breaks. After a month or 2, I invited him out. I honestly didn't care what his work was or how much money he earned. He was attractive, and after a few dates, I knew he was the right guy for me. 6 months later, I introduced him to my parents. They were first pleased to see him, but as they learned more about his family and background, the less they liked him. They eventually began pressuring me to end my relationship with him since they did not believe we were a good match. Apparently, they sought to save me from heartbreak and informed me that the relationship would never work since we were too different. They predicted that the honeymoon phase would come to an end and that we would eventually part ways. I hail from a very wealthy business family. My grandparents founded an investing firm, which my parents now control. It's lucrative, and my parents have always been proud of their work, the money they make, where they come from, and the people they associate with. In short, they've always been quite snobby, but it has never rubbed off on me. In fact, whenever I saw them acting as if they were too wonderful for everyone else, it made me uncomfortable. I resolved at a young age that I did not want to be like that, and I believe I followed through on my decision. My parents hoped that both my sister and I would work for them and help them grow the business. But, honestly, working for my parents looked like a nightmare, so I began working elsewhere. I was already on thin ice because I had disappointed them by not joining the firm after graduation. I believe my decision to be with Luke was the final straw. So when we became engaged, they were outraged and offered me an ultimatum. I could either end the engagement and remain a member of the family, or they would disown me and make my sister the heir to their whole estate. To be honest, my sister was our parents' favorite child, and for good reason. She had earned it because, since I was a child, she had been exactly the type of person my parents had hoped to raise. Sophie, my sister, has always been exactly like my parents. She was likewise proud of our fortune, despite the fact that she had not contributed to its acquisition. She was just as snobby and arrogant, believing she was superior to everyone else just because our parents had a lot of money. Sophie is my younger sister, she's 2 years younger, so I tried to make her act more like me, or a normal person, to be honest, but it never really worked. I believe she was just too much like my parents to recognize that the way they interacted with others was wrong. Anyway, I used to get along with her when we were younger, but when she started high school, she became a bit of a bully, and we stopped having a good connection. It was also somewhat disgusting to be continuously informed that I needed to be more like my sister when it came to mingling with others. According to my parents, I had no standards. There was also the fact that she lived her life exactly as our parents expected her to. She earned a business degree and began working with our parents to move the firm forward. She was now the model child for the ideal daughter. My parents, and occasionally Sophie, had tried very hard to persuade me to break up with Luke while we were dating because they disagreed with our relationship. Unfortunately for them, they were unable to succeed, and we became engaged. After my parents handed me that ultimatum, it was a simple decision for me. I wasn't concerned about their inheritance at all. I just wanted to live a peaceful life with Luke, so I told them they could disown me and I would be fine with it. About 3 months before my wedding, my parents openly proclaimed to the family that they were disowning me for marrying someone who plainly loved me solely because I came from a wealthy family. They wanted to know how long our marriage would endure if I didn't have the money I did. So far, with no possibility of inheritance, they were convinced that Luke would abandon me as soon as he discovered I had been disowned, and that my sister would receive the entire estate. But, judging by the fact that Luke and I are currently expecting our first child together, I guess they were mistaken. I was quite sad after they disowned me. Despite everything, they were my family, and I cherished them. But I never spoke with them again. They did not reach out to me either. I continued to work in human resources, and Luke was promoted to warehouse manager shortly after we married. The role also included a considerable rise. So life has been rather comfortable, and we have been very happy together. We found out I was pregnant a few months earlier, and now it was time to complete our joyful little family. Since they discovered Luke and I were dating, my in-laws have treated me as if I were their own daughter, and they have never let me miss my own family. I was very satisfied with life, and there was no drama, until 2 weeks ago, when Sophie texted me to say that our parents could be coming to see me soon. And, in case you're wondering why she warned me, it's not because she had magically transformed into a better person. She just reached out because she was angry with our parents. Apparently, a year ago, they paired her up with a guy who happened to be the son of a very close friend. She decided to go out with him, give him a chance, and see where things went. Our parents always spoke favorably of his family, because, of course, they came from similar financial backgrounds. The guy was also fairly well off. He proposed to Sophie about a month ago, after they had been dating for about a year. She thought this would make the family happy, and she was also eager to settle down and have her own family. But before they could announce their engagement, the guy's parents urged that both of them undergo reproductive tests. They were hoping for a grandchild, and their son had previously been duped by another woman who had not stated that she had undergone a hysterectomy for medical reasons. They did not want to take the danger again. Sophie felt it was strange, but she agreed to do it because our parents wanted her to get it over with so they could announce their engagement. Unfortunately, they discovered she was sterile. They tested her a few more times just to be sure, but the findings were always the same. My parents went to her reproductive doctors, but they had no clear explanation for why this was happening to her. The guy eventually broke up with her since he did not want to go against his family's wishes. And the most lovely aspect of it all? My folks are currently blaming her for some reason. I don't even want to go into how messed up everything is. I was terrified when I read the text she sent, and by the end of the message, I was extremely angry. She said she was telling me all of this because she knew our parents would contact me soon. They had learned from a few of my cousins that I was expecting, and because they no longer had a chance of having grandkids from her, I was their only hope. After reading the message, I chatted with Luke. We determined that, regardless of what happened, we would not reunite with them. It was simply not worth it. And, after how they handled Sophie, I wanted nothing to do with them. My parents arrived at my door 3 days ago, just as Sophie had mentioned. When I opened it, they hugged me and said they had heard they were going to be grandparents. They wanted to move on from the past and start over. That's why they came to reconcile with me. They even brought gifts totaling about $40,000 that were still in the car. The mention of the gifts and their worth irritated me even more. I was only a few months into my pregnancy, so I wasn't showing, and I was wearing pretty loose clothes. So I told my parents that what they had heard about my becoming pregnant was not real. I also told them I had recently spoken with Sophie and understood exactly why they were there. So, even if it were true, I had no desire to reconcile with them. I'm my own person, not a baby-making machine. And if they simply wanted to reconnect because I was their only chance at having grandchildren, I didn't want that kind of relationship at all. I also informed them I knew what I was worth, and it was definitely more than $40,000. Before I shut the door, I was extremely satisfied. I don't believe I did anything wrong because, given how they treated both me and Sophie, I don't believe they deserve the opportunity to have the kind of family they desire. But then my father sent me a note, and now I'm kind of confused, which is why I'm here to ask for guidance on what to do. It's not a very long message, so I'll simply paste it here and let you make of it what you will. Dad's message: we came to visit you and make things right because we know you're pregnant. I know you had specifically told everyone not to tell us about it just yet, but everyone in the family agreed it was time to make things right with you, and so did we. You have no idea how sorry your mother and I felt about everything after you married. We had wanted to contact you several times, but every time we discussed you with the rest of the family, we discovered that you still disliked us. We waited for you to calm down before reaching out. I guess that was our mistake, not doing anything and waiting for things to cool down before apologizing. But I sincerely want to apologize to you for what we put you through. We also want to apologize to Luke because we were completely mistaken about him. It's just that we didn't want him to break your heart, and you're aware how frequent it is in our circles to discover that the person your child is seeing is a gold digger. So we simply wanted to save you from it. I suppose we went a little overboard and never truly gave Luke a fighting chance. We were just trying to protect you, but now I realize we didn't do it correctly. I wish I could have apologized to you a long time ago, and believe me, your mother and I will always be sorry for our actions. I can guarantee you that whatever Sophie said to you is not true. Certainly not all of it. Her ex did not dump her solely because she was sterile. There were plenty of other reasons she didn't disclose, such as her extreme anger issues and her insecurity around him. I bet she didn't tell you about it, but her ex later contacted us to let us know that they were the real reasons he left her, not simply the fertility troubles. Finally, I know you're worth far more than the presents we provided. We just wanted to express how sad we were, and still are, from the bottom of our hearts. I hope you see this and forgive us. So this is what they sent. And now I'm extremely perplexed. I'm desperate to discover the truth about everything, but I'm not sure whether it's really my responsibility anymore. I also feel like a jerk since I slammed the door on my parents when they tried to reconcile with me. And now I'm wondering whether I'm the asshole for ignoring my parents' attempts to make things right with me. Update 1. So I asked Luke about it, and he told me, like many others in the comments, that it doesn't really matter what the truth is at this time. It doesn't matter what the true reason for my sister's separation with her ex is, because my parents were only here because I was pregnant. If that hadn't been the case, they would never have contacted me again. And the fact that they had waited so long demonstrates that they assumed they could come and go as they pleased, and I was just going to have to deal with it. He explained that the message they sent me was an attempt to emotionally manipulate me, and that because I was pregnant, I may have been more vulnerable, which is why I fell for it. I agree with him there, because I've suddenly been more emotional about things. But Luke was able to identify numerous flaws in the message they sent me. For example, if they truly regretted how they had treated me, and particularly Luke, they should have contacted us at least once. Granted, I appeared upset with them, but how was not talking to them going to change that? They must have known that if they wanted to set things right, they needed to talk to us. They couldn't wait for us to relax on our own. That's not how it works. More importantly, they were aware that Luke and I kept our finances separate until we married. In truth, I had approached Luke, not the other way around. So, if he had been a gold digger, I'm very sure he would have approached me instead. For the first few months, they were understandably anxious about the contrasts between our families and financial backgrounds. They never tried to get along with Luke or get to know him. They acknowledged this truth in their message, but they never gave him an opportunity. But they didn't have the decency to apologize to him separately. It's not as if they didn't know his phone number or how to contact him. He was on social media, and they could have contacted him there if they were truly sorry. However, the way they acted and even phrased things made it clear that they were treating this extremely carelessly. So I have no reason to feel bad about what has happened. Talking with Luke about this has made me feel a lot better about my decision. I also decided not to contact Sophie. I'm not sure what her motives were, but one thing is certain, she didn't reach out to me out of the kindness of her heart. Some people in the comments complained that I was being too hard on Sophie because she had a bad experience recently and merely wanted to warn me. So I should probably refrain from saying such negative things about her because, in the end, she did me a favor by informing me that my parents would be visiting. That might be true. However, this does not invalidate her previous actions. She cut me off on the same day as my parents and never followed up with me again. Not to mention that I had previously discussed her personality in my original post. She had always been biased toward Luke because his background and actions were no better than my parents. The only reason she told me about all of this was because she was upset with our parents. I'm very sure if things had worked out with the guy my parents had matched her up with, she wouldn't have contacted me, and everything would have stayed the same. So she did this to exact revenge on our parents, rather than to protect me. I understand she went through a terrible ordeal, and as a woman, I will always support her and maintain that the way her ex and our parents punished her for something she had no control over is wrong. But as her sister, I will never forgive her. And I really don't need to. I know that now. I haven't heard from my parents in a few days, and they haven't tried to contact me since that message. So I'm hoping they'll keep to that and not contact me after this. Because I genuinely do not want any more drama. I just want my pregnancy to be smooth and nice, and they will have to stay away. I'll decide whether or not to include them in my life after the baby is born. Because for now, my own happiness is my #1 priority. And it's not like my children will never know the affection of grandparents, uncles, and aunts. My in-laws, as well as Luke's brothers, have made an effort to check in on me every other weekend, whether by phone or in person. It warms my heart to see how tight their family is, and how quickly they welcomed me into their family after discovering their son adored me, with no drama or complaints. I wish my family had done the same, but alas. Update 2. My parents paid me a visit 2 weeks ago to reconcile with me. But I made it plain that I did not want to speak with them right now. We hadn't spoken since then, with the exception of the text message they sent me. I didn't even respond to that. I assumed they would take the hint and realize that this was not the time to disturb me. But clearly, they couldn't just let this go. They decided to show up again, yesterday. Luke and I spent the evening at home because it was a Sunday. Someone knocked on the door unexpectedly, despite the fact that we were not expecting any visitors. When Luke looked outside, he noticed my parents were standing there. He inquired if I wanted to let them in or not, and, obviously, I said no. So Luke instructed them to leave, and I went to my bedroom since I didn't want to deal with it right now. I was fatigued and not in the mood. Instead of leaving me alone when Luke told them to, my parents remained at the door and argued with him. They got so loud that I had to come back out and personally tell them to leave. Even then, they continued to argue with me, insisting that they were only here to make things right with me and that I should give them a chance. They argued that they had raised me, therefore this was the absolute minimum I could do for them. I tried to explain that I would speak with them when I was less emotionally volatile, but now was not the time to worry me. They refused to listen. Instead, they emphasized why I should be grateful to them for the life they had given me, claiming that I was stealing the opportunity to be grandparents from them, all because of a stupid little lapse in judgment 3 years prior. They sounded very unhappy with me, which irritated me because they were in no position to make demands right now. And their stupid little lapse in judgment, as they phrased it, had caused a lot of sorrow and misery for me, so perhaps it wasn't as minor as they imagined. It was up to me to decide whether to forgive them now or in 5 years. They couldn't make me forgive them, and they needed to understand this. My sole error in the case was becoming very emotional and arguing with them, rather than simply contacting the cops and letting them handle it. Anyway, when I started debating with them, my mother burst into tears and accused me of being cold-hearted. She explained that she had already had to deal with the knowledge that Sophie would not be a mother, and now I was treating her this way despite everything she had gone through. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to express her feelings about how I was treating her. When my parents had put Sophie into a corner because she couldn't have children, she felt compelled to tell me about it, even though she hadn't spoken to me in years. After that, I simply snapped. I informed my parents that in order to be good grandparents, they first had to be decent parents, which they had failed badly at. First, they had wrecked their connection with me simply because they couldn't understand my want to be with Luke. He wasn't a spoiled rich brat like most people in our circle. Instead, he was a trustworthy and diligent individual. Clearly, they were not the ideals they stood for. As if that wasn't awful enough, they had wrecked their relationship with Sophie, their golden child. She had done everything right her entire life to impress them, and still they could only see one thing: she was sterile. They had reduced her to just one condition and pushed her away, despite the fact that her entire life she had done nothing but attempt to make them happy. At least in my case, they had the justification that I had constantly gone against them, which made it extremely easy to cut me off. But there was no justification for them to be so nasty to Sophie, especially at a time when they should have been supporting her. They had failed both of us. And they had no right to claim a place in our life. I'm not sure about Sophie, but I wasn't going to forgive them anytime soon. If they were truly remorseful for what they had done, they would have left me alone and realized that I was not in the correct mental state to cope with them right now. Instead of simply dealing with their punishment, not talking to me until I was ready, they decided to impose their presence on us and expect me to be fine with it. I was not pleased with it, and I told them so. Even after everything I said, if they didn't leave me alone, I'd have to call the cops, which would not look good for them. They only departed after that, and I was quite distraught for hours afterwards. I shouldn't have come out of my room to talk to them, but I'm glad I was able to get everything off my chest. I needed to express these things aloud. I needed them to hear it so they understood how horribly they had failed both of their children. And now that it's out there, I feel a lot lighter. Of course, I regret spending my evening fighting with them. It was a complete waste of time. But at least something positive came out of it. Update 3. Hello folks. So, almost 3 months have passed since my last report, and I'm well into my pregnancy now. I'm clearly showing, and my baby will arrive in 2 to 3 months, hopefully. Not much has changed since the last time I posted here. Part of the reason I was so idle was that I didn't have much to say. After our last dispute, my parents finally honored my wishes and did not contact me again. And no, I haven't maintained in touch with Sophie since, as I previously stated, we no longer have a relationship. According to my relatives, she resigned her job and no longer works for our family business. So it's quite sad, but I don't think my parents will be able to fulfill their ambition of having their daughters carry on their company's legacy, unless I change my mind later. I'm providing this update now since my parents' lawyer called me a few days ago. The final time the guy contacted me, he told me that my parents had formally disowned me and that I would not receive any inheritance from them. This time, he had the opposite news for me. He informed me that my parents had decided to re-establish my inheritance by changing their will to include me. Again, I'm not sure whether this is an attempt to placate me before the kid arrives, but it hasn't eased my feelings toward them thus far. However, if I were to look at the future, I would absolutely prefer to take over my parents' business after they retire. And having Luke run with me would provide poetic justice. I haven't given it much thought yet, but I plan to inform my parents when my kid is born that if they agree to let me take over the firm and sign the papers, I may consider allowing them to have a relationship with their grandson. I know that seems selfish, but I believe Luke and I have worked hard enough, and we deserve it. It will also demonstrate to us just how remorseful my parents are. And if Sophie wants to work with us, I'm not against it. However, for the time being, this is only a plan, and none of it has been put into action. Luke agrees with the concept, and will think about it when the kid is born. Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Parents demand I cancel my wedding for sister's engagement, but the truth about her cheating changed everything. Engaged to my fiancé Jake, 30 million. I, a 28-year-old lady, have been for roughly 8 months. Up until last week, when my parents shocked us, our October wedding was scheduled and all was going according to plan. For background, Mia, 25F, our younger sister has always been the golden child in our family. She has been seeing Tom, 26 million, her lover for around 2 years. In practically every sphere of our existence, my parents have always showered Mia with royal care. Though I hate to sound negative, I have always felt as though hers dominates my successes. Mia was a cheerleader while I was a straight-A student playing on the volleyball team back in high school. Her achievements always seemed to eclipse all mine. Not to get me wrong, cheerleading merits just as much respect as any other sport, but would it have killed my parents to exhibit the same fervor for my events? I grew used to my absent parents and learned to expect almost little from them. I thus cut myself off from Mia, though deep down I knew it wasn't her responsibility. My immature self blamed mom for everything. My viewpoint altered only in college, when I met Jake, the love of my life. He let me see that I deserved just as much attention as everyone else and was deserving of affection. Jake showed me that every one of us is unique in our own right and that, should someone not value my accomplishments, well, that is their loss. I also realized that it was unfair to hold Mia totally responsible when our parents were clearly in charge. I thus resolved to try to rebuild whatever sisterly relationship we still had. I started letting her know she could talk to me about anything and checking up on her more often. She first hesitated naturally, but she soon grew more at ease sharing with me. We discussed practically anything, regardless of its silliness or gravity. Though our tastes and paths of life were different, I was glad our connection was getting better gradually. We seemed to be at last the sisters we ought to have been all along. Mia knew first when Jake proposed to her. Telling me she couldn't wait to help arrange my wedding, she was as eager as I was. Everything seemed ideal at that point. I was therefore really taken aback when my mother called last Wednesday. The call began innocuously enough. Mom inquired about wedding preparations, which was odd given her previous lack of enthusiasm. I ought to have seen something was wrong. She finally got right to the point after a few minutes of small talk. Mia and Tom were getting engaged. I started to be delighted for my sister as soon as those words emerged from her mouth. Better than this, what could be? Then I noticed Mom had stated, planning to get engaged, which threw me off. Mom said Mia had told her Tom had been hinting at proposing when I asked her what she meant by that. He had done all the other usual things, asked about her ring size, advised her to get a new outfit, and told her. Although these were rather clear indicators, Mia always had a tendency of romanticizing everything and exaggerating events to make them appear more than they really were. I wanted Mia not to have her expectations skyrocketing only to be let down. When I asked Mom whether she was absolutely convinced Tom was proposing, she answered boldly. That would have marked the end of the call, but another surprise was approaching, one I would not be pleased about. My mother asked me to call off our wedding since Tom and Mia were apparently engaged. I let out a gasp. Though I must have misinterpreted, I asked her to clarify. No, she was dead serious. For 10 months I had been planning. She wanted me to call off the wedding Jake had proposed. We had waited this long since we wanted the wedding of our dreams and refused to compromise on anything. Deposits for the caterers and other suppliers had already been laid down. Not to mention the inconvenience of rearranging things, moving everything back a year would entail losing a large sum of money. What had descended upon Mom and Dad was unknown to me. When we were short on money, they had volunteered to cover the venue. I assumed this was because they were at last interested in my life. Looking back, It seemed like they did it to challenge Jake's parents. But I was too delighted at the time to pay attention to their hidden agendas. Wait, though, this was not even the worst of things. You haven't heard the rationale behind my planned delay of my wedding for Mia's expected engagement. Mom clarified that Mia wanted to be the center of attention for a full year, complete with announcements on social media and engagement pictures. I could not understand at all. Who loses money over something as flimsy as social media and calls their sister off from her wedding? Promising not to post anything about my wedding online, I tried to argue with Mom, but she claimed they would withdraw all the money they had promised for the wedding should I refuse to postpone it. Their lovely daughter was an attention seeker, hence at this time they were virtually blackmailing me. This was ludicrous and unfair, I told my mother. We debated for some time, her arguing that I was being thoughtless of Mia's sentiments and selfish. What about my feelings? I asked repeatedly. Still, I received no meaningful response. She responded simply that they wouldn't pay for the venue should I proceed with the wedding. I got furious. All my life, I gave things up for Mia's sake. Now, when I was at last ready to experience the day of my dreams, that too was being robbed from me. Out of pure annoyance and rage, I did something I never would have done. I contacted Mia's fiancé, Tom, to let him know something about Mia he didn't know. The four of us, Jake and I, Mia and Tom, went on a double date some years ago when everything was good. One of those few times when we all had time to hang around together. I recall being quite content. We laughed, told stories, and for once everything seemed ideal. Mia and I excused ourselves to the bathroom to freshen at one point throughout the evening. Mia handed me her phone to hold as we corrected our makeup so she could wash her hands. A text message suddenly sprang up on the screen. It came from someone called Mike wondering whether they might get back together. My heart still missed a beat. Though I heard Mia had dated someone some years ago, I felt he was no more relevant. Not sure I could resist asking, "Who's Mike, and why is he asking to meet again?" Mia started to spin right away. She dismissed it, believing it was nothing, just some old acquaintance extending outreach. Still, I could see her eyes ablaze with dread. I questioned once more whether something was developing between her and Mike. She said she had some texting back and forth, but she insisted it was not major. She shrugged her eyes and replied lightly, "Tom didn't need to know, it's nothing," when I inquired whether Tom knew about this. Tom seemed to be a nice man totally loving Mia. Though I couldn't get rid of the uncomfortable sensation, I let it pass since Mia later on told me she was no longer corresponding with her ex. Right then, as Mia was trying to rob me of my bliss, my thoughts went crazy. I lay it all out when I phoned Tom, roughly following the text I had seen that day. And should that not be sufficient, I advised him to monitor his girlfriend. Looking back, I realized this was sort of improper, not the sort of truth I should have been imparting to Tom, of course, but the way I did it. But already it was too late. I spoke with Tom 2 days ago, and then Mom called. Just say I was glad I wasn't in front of her. She was yelling like a crazed person, as though a tragedy had hit. Her comments really impacted me as I had made a major error. Tom apparently told Mia they needed to talk when phoning her. Mia got all ready even though she was about to be engaged, but when she at last arrived at the location, Tom was quite irate. He inquired whether that was accurate and reiterated what I had said. Mia first denied it, but she grew angry when Tom wanted to see her phone, telling him he should believe her. Tom split from Mia at last. Mom and Dad never seemed likely to pardon me for this. Mom yelled at me, and I could hear Mia berating me in the backdrop. I kept apologizing, saying I only did this because they insisted I call off my wedding. I told them I had worked very hard on it. Dad's ruling then was that he was taking back the money they had set aside for the venue. I felt as like I had lost everything, my parents, Mia, and any chance for a marriage at that same instant. Given what had happened, I knew Jake would not be pleased with me either. When I attempted phoning Mia to have a conversation, she didn't respond to my calls or texts. At the time, Jake was on a business trip, hence he was not aware that our wedding was under risk, partially because to me. Though it wasn't entirely my fault, the stress was intolerable and I felt bad for damaging Mia's relationship. I at last told Jake everything when he returned from his trip. He was quite helpful and encouraged me that we would work things out together. It relieves me. He helped me see that I ought to have done it even earlier, as being honest was the correct thing to do. Regarding the wedding, Jake and I decided to proceed even if it meant lowering expenses. We began generating ideas for financial savings. We contacted relatives and friends, outlining the circumstances and requesting assistance. Unbelievably, one of Jake's pals came to save us. He came upon us at a classy but reasonably priced location via one of his contacts. Given the current situation, we simply have to delay the wedding somewhat more, which is quite okay with me. I was attempting to stay in touch with my parents throughout this. Looking back, I'm not sure why I did this. At the time, I was afraid of being let down. I was living with guilt. Still, they were obstinate, refusing to show up for my wedding if it proceeded as scheduled. The wedding was still under preparation, and despite all the challenges, everything began to fall together. Sadly, many of my family RSVP'd that they would not be going or responded little at all. I could guess the news had gone without having to be Sherlock. One of my aunts told me Mom and Mia had depicted me as a soap opera villain who lied to undermine her sister's happiness and could not accept it. They even changed the story, saying Mia was already engaged and preparing to wed, but I later got engaged to take the front stage. Ignoring me was one thing, lying about my character took effort. By now I was exhausted. After all that had happened, I couldn't look and feel my best for a wedding. Simultaneously, I struggled to let my parents define me as they had throughout their lifetime. They accused me of being envious and cruel, attributing Mia's life destruction to me. Mia, on the other hand, was in ruins. She hadn't spoken to me since the incident, hence even though I knew what I did was appropriate, I felt awful. So, I'm asking you. Am I the a-hole for not postponing my wedding and informing Mia's fiancé of her cheating? Update. I published a few days ago, and the reaction has been really strong. Unbelievably, my parents began talking to me, but not for the reasons you might guess. They insisted that I apologize to Mia and somehow sort things out with Tom. Should I fail, they even threatened to have me disowned. Through all of this, Jake has been rather encouraging, telling me we did the right thing and we should concentrate on our forthcoming wedding. But at last Mia got back to me. Furious and devastated, she accused me of destroying her life and undermining her happiness out of spite. The talk was challenging. She wasn't open to hearing me try to explain my perspective. She persisted in arguing, regardless of what she had done, I had no right to meddle in her relationship. I lost my cool and asked her who gave her the right to believe she could influence my wedding plans that had been in place long before she was almost engaged. She hung up before I could even bring up the lies Mom and she had been telling about me. Meg, a childhood acquaintance I hadn't heard from in years, called me out of the blue when word of the family strife spread like wildfire. After moving out for college, I had disconnected from Meg, and our only means of contact was social media. But Mia had kept in touch with her for a bit longer. Their friendship reached into their early 20s. Meg also disclosed another startling story concerning Mia's adultery, one that happened around a year ago. Meg's 25th birthday celebration was attended by Mia without her then boyfriend Tom, who presumably was on a trip. Meg saw Mia growing more flirty with various male visitors, including her boyfriend, as the evening progressed and practically everyone was intoxicated. Meg first dismissed it as Mia's usual manner. She had always been a natural flirt. Meg knew, though, she hadn't seen Mia or her partner for some time as the celebration drew to an end and guests started to leave. Red-handed together in another room, they were caught. Given Mia and Tom had been dating 2 to 3 years at the time, this was very embarrassing. The episode split Meg and Mia and destroyed their friendship. When Meg learned about everything, she assumed I should know that Mia did nothing by mistake. She had become accustomed to this conduct and had somehow always gotten away with it. This fresh material really surprised me. Mia's dishonesty, I came to see, was not a one-time error but rather a habit. I asked Meg only one favor. Could she kindly forward this news to Tom herself? I was acting for a cause. When my fiancé Jake visited Tom, he was not doing well. Though he didn't say it, I'm sure he was also blaming me for what I had told him. He was second-guessing everything. Better still if someone else than me delivered this terrible news. I also wanted to avoid feeding the story that I was jealous of Mia, hence I didn't want to do this myself. Tom wanted to meet personally to go over things as soon as he received word from Meg. I accepted, expecting for some sort of conclusion or at least clear the air. Tom clearly was in shock from all that had transpired when we met at a neighborhood coffee shop. Meg's disclosure came to him like yet another wave, yet it was welcome to at last know the truth. Tom related how his split from Mia turned out. Mia was right to believe Tom intended to pop the question to her. Following our talk, he challenged Mia about the cheating, and she finally came clean. Though crushed, he valued my candor. He claimed it was preferable to know the truth now than to learn later, maybe following marriage. Tom said he had thought something was awry in their relationship for some time but couldn't pin it down until I phoned. We spoke for a lengthy period during which Tom revealed he intended to set aside time for personal healing and life review. Though it hurt, he appreciated me for having the guts to tell him the truth. Knowing I had done the right thing by being truthful with Tom, this chat brought me closure. Still, things with my family have not gotten better. My parents still support Mia. They think I was out of line and must make apologies. Focusing just on Mia's pain and neglecting the fact she cheated, they cannot seem to understand why I did what I did. Friends and relatives who learned about the circumstances have also been quite helpful. Many expressed shock at the way my parents behaved and praised me for defending what was right. Though I have a mixed bag of feelings, I am appreciative of the help from people who see my viewpoint. I'm trying to keep concentrated on the good and keep wedding planning underway. Despite the threats from his parents, Jake and I have decided to carry out our plans. We have changed the budget and are working to create the wedding unique without their financial support. Though I know the drama is not over, I am resolved to stick to my position. I refuse to allow Mia's behavior or the inclination of my parents define my existence anymore. I have to give my future with Jake top priority and my happiness. Hey, everyone. Every moment that passes makes my life seem to get more convoluted. About 4 days following my initial update, events changed dramatically and unexpectedly. Just as I felt the situation could not get worse, it did. Trying to concentrate, I was at work when Jake called urgently. Panicked, he told me to head straight home. Fuming something horrible, I rushed back. When I got here, Jake seemed obviously upset. He handed me a note that had dropped under our door. It came from a lawyer standing in for my parents. Over the consequences from Mia's failed engagement, they were threatening to sue me for emotional suffering and slanderous remarks. I was astounded. My own parents were suing me. The letter explained how my actions had destroyed Mia's reputation and brought her great emotional suffering. It called for a public apology, a retraction of my remarks on Mia's adultery, and a sizable payback in money. To be as nasty as possible, my parents had stretched every limit. My phone buzzed as I went over the letter. Mia was the one calling constantly. At last, looking for some answers, I took up Mia's voice carrying a mix of desperation and wrath. Saying I had destroyed her life and she had nothing left, she screamed at me. She said she had lost her work since Tom had informed colleagues and mutual acquaintances of hers about her adultery. The word had gone like wildfire, and she was today the target of rumors and criticism. She was deemed problematic, which resulted in her termination. Having my parents send me that legal fear, I felt Mia got what she deserved. She was inconsolable even though I tried to reason with her, stressing that she had to own her actions. Claiming that I had always wanted to see her fail, she charged me with being envious and bitter. The chat made me feel forlorn and exhausted. The rest of the evening, Jake and I went over our choices. Although we couldn't let my parents pressure us into compliance, we couldn't afford to get caught in a legal fight with them. This legal fight would simply mark the nail in the coffin, as I believe they knew we were already juggling our wedding budget. I contacted a lawyer for help the next day. The circumstances stunned him, but he reassured me our case was strong. He advised us to compile proof of Mia's adultery and how it affected her relationship to Tom. Should my parents carry out their threats, he also cautioned us to get ready for a counterclaim. All of this was going on when I got another unplanned call, this one from Tom's mother. Having heard about the circumstances, she wanted to thank me for guiding Tom toward the truth. Tom was devastated, she remarked, but he was glad to learn before committing himself for lifetime. She also said Tom intended to start again in another city. Her call provided a minor solace among all the turmoil. It let me realize that by being honest, I had done the right thing even with the instantaneous fallout. Though they may act as outrageously as they wanted, my parents and Mia would remain in the wrong. That weekend, things took yet another drastic turn. Unexpectedly showing up at our residence were my folks furious. They insisted on talking with me. Though Jake tried to calm them, it soon turned into a shouting contest. While my mother wailed and begged me to mend things with Mia, my father claimed I had destroyed the family. Should I fail to meet their expectations, they reiterated their threats to cut me off financially and go on with the lawsuit. I stayed put, not cowering into compliance. I told them I would not be sorry for speaking the truth. Mia's actions have consequences. My parents stormed out at the end of the confrontation, resolved to start the case. The next several days were a haze of emotional upheaval and legal discussions. Though Jake and I tried to concentrate on our wedding preparations, the tension was too great. Extended family members who had heard about the circumstances started messaging us. Some offered support while others attacked my behavior. Although Jake didn't deserve all this drama, I really detested dragging him through it, but I was also appreciative of his unflinching support. In among all this, Meg, the childhood friend who had informed me of Mia's past infidelity, sent me an unexpected note. Should my parents want to take legal action, her offer to submit a statement regarding what had happened at her party may be very important proof. Meg's encouragement and the data we were compiling helped me to begin to see hope. Although it was obvious that this struggle was far from finished, I resolved myself to stick to what was right. As I am working on it, I also want to thank you all for being my support network during this period. Though it hasn't been simple, you have clearly shown me direction. I will see you folks a little. Hello, everyone. After several more days, the issue has gotten quite hot. Mia and my dad insisted on getting together personally to go over everything. Jake and I consented, believing this encounter could at last provide some clarity and closure. We agreed to get together in our place so we might manage the surroundings and steer clear of a public display. There was clear tension in the air as my parents and Mia showed up. When they sat down, I could see the expectation in their eyes. Though I had no intention of backing down, they most likely assumed I would be apologizing and begging for forgiveness. I began with tackling the elephant in the room. My parents and Mia looked perplexedly, obviously not expecting this. I informed them, I understand why everyone is here today, but before we go any further, I want to make one thing clear. I'm here to lay out the facts. I inhaled deeply and started making my point. I began with the couple months ago. I questioned Mia if it wasn't true that she handed me her phone during our double-date dinner and that I found she was chatting to Mike, her ex-boyfriend, when she was in a very committed relationship with Tom. She said she made a one-time error, but we both knew it wasn't accurate. Mia moved uneasily in her seat, her face pallid. I carried on, opening a folder loaded with proof. She confirmed that Mia had been found cheating with her boyfriend when I told her I had talked with Meg, who threw the party a year ago. This was a behavior trend, not a one-time error. I turned over a written statement Meg sent. Mia's parents and I looked at it, their expressions changing from uncertainty to shock. Still, that was only one thing. I also brought out more proof. Text exchanges between Mia and Meg in which Mia admitted to cheating and pleaded with Meg not to tell Tom. These timestamped signals were unambiguous and devoid of uncertainty. On the table I arranged the printed messages. Though this time it appeared more toward Mia than it did me, my mother gasped and my father's face became red with rage. At last, I turned to Tom and said in a letter, he spoke about how he approached Mia following our talk and how she finally admitted. He also detailed the emotional toll her adultery took on him and how it affected his choice not to pop the question. My parents found no words. Unable to dispute the overwhelming proof, they fixated on the paperwork before them. Tears welled in Mia's eyes, but she said nothing, clearly understanding the seriousness of the matter. I then addressed the lawsuit. Although my parents had threatened to sue me for emotional suffering and slander, based on the facts it was abundantly evident that what I had said was accurate. They lacked legal justification for their posture. Actually, if they went after this, I had a strong case for a counterclaim. The space was quiet. Clearly surprised and adjusting to the reality of the circumstances were my parents and Mia. Knowing that I had at last advocated for myself, I felt relief. For the last time, I told Mia I did this because it was the proper thing to do, not out of spite or jealousy. Mia had consequences for her actions. It was time for her to own them. Regarding my wedding, my message was straightforward. Either with or without their approval, everything was going forward as scheduled. We wouldn't allow someone to destroy our happiness. Jake and I would be getting married. Rising to indicate that the session was over, I hoped this would be a turning point for all of us. That brought me closure and I left the room. Though I am aware that difficulties lie ahead, I feel for the first time in a long time under charge of my own life. Although my parents and Mia can proceed with their case, now they know I will be squarely facing them and there is no good outcome for either of us. The encouragement of our friends and relatives keeps Jake and I forging ahead with our new life. Though the road to recovery with my sister and family will be long and challenging, we are ready to travel it together. Eventually, defending myself and acting morally offered a sense of tranquility I had been lacking for so long. Looking ahead, Jake and I know we are stronger since we confronted these obstacles squarely. Without the recommendations and encouragement in the comments, this would not have been feasible. All of you and your tales have taught me so much. Thank you. Then farewell. My wife confessed to cheating on me for 4 years because she was bored and left me for weeks. Now she wants me back. For 17 years, my wife, 39F, and I, 40M, had been wed. Our 3 girls are 11, 13, and 15. We have been together for around 23 years and were high school sweethearts. Although I don't know much, this is the only information I know. 3 days ago, my wife returned home from her job. On the 4th day, she had to go to work, but first she quickly packed an overnight bag and departed. Our oldest daughter was home when she left, so that's the only reason I know this. My wife was sobbing and upset that she was hardly able to speak when she tried to talk to her. She was on the verge of panic. None of our calls or texts are getting a response from her. I immediately called her parents, who eventually replied that my wife is safe with them and urged me to be understanding and patient. They only said that. I attempted to get in touch with her brother, sister, and a close colleague. Her brother claimed to know nothing, and her coworker claimed that 3 days prior, she had arrived at work in the morning but had left by midday. She only knew that. There hasn't been any communication with my wife or the children since. We're not hearing anything from anyone. I'm trying to get by without her here with my 3 daughters. All I can answer when the kids ask me what's going on or what happened with mom is that she's with grandma and grandpa and that we should be understanding and patient. I can't help but want to swiftly load up the kids and head over there without warning. Sitting here in limbo is terrible, and it's just 3 hours away. The children believe we got into a heated argument and are divorcing, but that couldn't be further from the reality. We never argue. The children are aware of this. I'm not sure what's happening, but could someone please explain it logically? I'm trying to handle everything without her, but my current mental condition has me thinking in circles. Your spouse would be the first person you would notify if someone died. My wife would be the first person I would turn to for assistance if it were me, though it's possible that some old trauma was triggered. We don't know anything, nothing makes sense. I sit here in limbo with the girls, unsure of what to do. Nobody is telling us anything, and none of us know anything. It makes me anxious, afraid, irate, etc. Almost every feeling imaginable in this circumstance. Is there anyone who can think of something reasonable? Why would you do this to your family? Update 1, I apologize. I don't know much about Reddit yet, not much to share. Because I'm not really sure how to do it, I don't know how to connect my previous post. I didn't sleep last night, it was a long night. I apologize for the brief update. I read every thread yesterday and into the night, but I don't plan on using the computer much today. Today, we finally read the responses. I'll just state my knowledge and stop there. I ended up calling the cops last night as my father-in-law didn't call. A wellness check was conducted, as many of you recommended. I won't go into the storm of problems that resulted from this, but my wife has been having an affair for at least 2 years, if not more. Everyone was right. The other man reportedly died that night after suffering a heart attack on Tuesday. It seems likely that my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law have been aware of it and have been filling in for her. My wife still hasn't been in touch with either the girls or me. For the time being, I'm attempting to hide this from them, but to be honest, I don't know what to do next. I only know that, and it's enough to almost spell my demise. I appreciate all of your assistance and guidance. That's all, but I'm not sure how to get over this news. Please offer up prayers for me and the 2 of us. Update 2. A couple people have suggested this sub to me. I recently joined and have been reading a lot of postings whenever I have free time, usually at night when the day's turmoil is over. Naturally, the brain then takes over, and I have these depressive episodes. After that, I experience intense rage and then both feelings at once. It's almost impossible to sleep. Then, like a zombie, I go about my day. All the acronyms are something I'm attempting to learn. I suppose Friday was my D-Day. I initially believed my wife's affair to have lasted 2 years, but it now appears highly probable that it lasted longer. She had known the man she cheated on with AP for some time. The disclosure came after he sadly died of a heart attack. With the assistance of my eldest daughter, I continue to conduct research. I'm not yet ready to post about a lot of topics. I honestly didn't intend to keep posting about my predicament, but so many people have given me so much support and guidance that it's practically therapeutic. Knowing that so many other individuals are going through this kind of pain is painful. I'm so sorry for that. Yesterday and today, I had meetings with 2 different attorneys to go over my alternatives. I also made several calls about treatment, but where I reside, wait periods are really lengthy. I'm making an effort to follow many of the advice given by others, such as abstaining from drinking, although I don't and never have. Taking care of myself, exercising, etc. For someone my age, I'd say I'm in excellent shape, but right now I struggle to find the motivation to work out. I recognize that a lot of you will want specifics, like who, what, when, and so on, but please know that I'm simply not yet ready to go into all of that. It feels like a new bomb goes off every day, and all I want is some guidance on one item so that I might be able to get some sleep. My wife, the mother of my 3 lovely girls and my best friend since high school, was everything to me. We shake hands in secret and share inside jokes. Everything is gone. Everything. It's simply gone. I get really depressed when I reflect back on all of our years together, including every milestone and every laugh. It is incapacitating. It seems like she didn't care about any of it, and now she won't be in my future. Naturally, the how could you question then surfaces, and I am seized with an insatiable rage. I pound the mattress and scream into my pillow till my arms hurt. The cycle is terrible. I only go to sleep because I'm so tired, and when I wake up the mind games start over. My girls, who have been attempting to care for me as if they were my parents, receive all of my energy. They aren't treated fairly. After learning about the affair, how did you all sleep? With just your thoughts, how did you cope with the emptiness and silence at night? Aside from my daughters, I've determined that sleep must be my top priority in all of this. I'm hoping you can help though, because I simply can't. Many thanks to all of you. Update 3. I apologize for my relative inexperience on Reddit. A little more than a week has passed since my D-Day, however I'm not sure how much of my circumstances I should reiterate or repeat. I've since discovered that my wife's affair lasted for more than 4 years. No precise time frame yet. It most likely began emotionally before becoming bodily. I'm also interested in how the epidemic and lockdowns affected this. I might or might not find out the answers. In any case, my in-laws unexpectedly came to visit their grandchildren yesterday. Since the start of this ordeal, Del EW has been staying in their house, which is utterly ridiculous. Naturally, they greeted the girls for a total of 15 minutes. I have 3 girls with my wife. They then requested a private conversation with me. As you can anticipate, the chat was lengthy. I don't want to go into detail about it in this piece. In any case, my wife wants to return home but is scared of the consequences of her behavior and is unable to confront her past. Her parents also conducted extensive research to find out if I intended to file for divorce. They put a lot of effort into persuading me to forgive my wife and keep the marriage together. They wanted my wife out of their home, but it was also obvious that they were extremely humiliated and ashamed. The conversation was quite polite and courteous. I acknowledged that I misled them by claiming that I was unsure of my future intentions since I intend to get a divorce. However, I fear that if I tell my wife, I will never get the truth. And I might never understand. However, if at all feasible, I would like her to sit in front of me and explain everything. I want her to look me in the eyes and tell me everything after we've been married for 17 years, been together since high school, had 3 children, made innumerable memories, and experienced everything together. Additionally, I want my children to understand that I offered her the chance to apologize, explain herself, and resolve the situation as responsible adults. I'm constantly trying to decide which course will be best for my children. I'm not sure. Perhaps I'm not doing it correctly. I can't legally bar my wife from our house. The attorney was extremely explicit about that. Therefore, even if I really don't want this right now, I can't stop my wife from coming home. In fact, my girls and I have begun to establish a pleasant routine. I therefore made a demand that, in my opinion, would be impossible to fulfill for some time. If, when my wife sat down with me face to face, looked me in the eyes, and told me everything about her affair, from beginning to end, without hesitation or more lying, I told her she may come home. She would next need to meet with the girls, provide an apology face to face, and respond to their inquiries. It's only fair, I reasoned, since they already know. Once more, she is legally free to return home anytime she pleases and is not subject to any obligations. However, I might be able to take advantage of her fear of us. Is that incorrect? Here, I'm not attempting to be cunning or dishonest. I simply don't want to live together just yet. If I can postpone it, our state has a 90-day waiting period before a divorce may occur. In any case, she will inevitably return home. Life will continue despite this disaster, and ultimately we will both need to return to our jobs. I simply wish to extend it in order to plan and improve my emotional and mental well-being. My wife says she doesn't want a divorce, but she has been texting the females. She apologizes to them over and over again. The texts have been shown to me. She inquires about me every day, and the truth about what she has done to us is really getting to her, especially in the past few days. How can I handle this? Was my request stupid? My wife is probably going to return home sooner rather than later. Right now, I have faith in my future. This doesn't scare me because I know it will happen eventually. As we proceed, I simply want to choose what's best for my girls and subsequently for myself. I am grateful to everyone who has been providing support, guidance, and encouragement. Update 4. I apologize for the length, but I just need to get this out of the way. It will be a bit of an anticlimax. Despite the awful weekend, my wife returned home yesterday. As the week progressed, there was a fair lot of build-up to it. Normally, when she walked through the doorway, I would embrace and kiss her, but this time, there was just this incredibly awkward tension between us. Before she spoke, she really approached me and attempted to embrace me, but I turned her away. Unbelievable. As though nothing had occurred. Naturally, I begged her to tell me everything after she calmed down. She stated once more that she is not yet ready. The outcome was the same when we chatted on the phone earlier this week. She simply reiterated that she wasn't prepared for that when I maintained that the only requirement for her to return home was that she loved the family enough to justify her absence of over 3 weeks. I took a few long breaths and tried to gather myself, even though it took a lot to keep from screaming at her. I didn't succeed. I abruptly stated after the first of many lengthy pauses that she had been having an affair with a coworker for more than 4 years, that she had planned to leave me for another man, that she had ghosted her entire family, and that she now enters the room without meeting the one requirement I had requested, and that I wanted a divorce. I suppose this is where the strangeness began. It was clear from her facial expression and body language that she was unaware of my level of knowledge regarding her affair. She gave me a wide-eyed look before simply standing in the kitchen and gazing at the floor. She remained silent and stern. This is not what I was anticipating at all. Perhaps an emotional outburst, a tearful confession, or even her cursing and screaming at me, accusing me of having the affair. Not this response, but rather a somber, "Okay, let's sit down and talk this out." To be honest, we must have stood in complete quiet for 5 minutes in the kitchen. It was simply the most peculiar thing I had ever encountered. Both she and I were obviously at a loss for words. "I had read all of your remarks and suggestions regarding my predicament. I even made notes. I had prepared myself for every eventuality this conversation could bring, with the exception of this one, while I sat in front of a mirror. I ultimately made the decision to document what I knew about her affair at that precise moment. I may have been foolish, but I told her what I knew, albeit with some assumptions about how she met AP, her sister's participation, what transpired during COVID, etc. All she could do was look at the floor. She didn't say anything, so I became more and more irate, but I did everything in my power to avoid becoming profane or raising my voice. At last, I calmed down. Another long, uneasy pause followed. Sadness replaced anger when everything became clear. Then I gently questioned her about what I had done to make her leave. Was I ever loved by her? Was he worth it too? She remained silent. Didn't move. Remained motionless, nothing at all from her. No sobs, no regrets, no shouting, no justification. She simply stood with her head down, nothing. This was painful. Perhaps this was more painful than D-Day. Not sure whether I would have moved, I just stood there looking at her. Then, of course, things got worse. The whole interaction was being overheard by our girls. I'm just so damned foolish. Over the past few weeks, I've been putting a lot of effort into attending to their needs and putting them first, but after I confronted my wife, I became emotional and stopped caring about where they were. Our oldest daughter, who had a lot of pent-up rage, stormed downstairs and screamed. My wife hurried to the bedroom and locked the door. We are currently at that point. Before I went to sleep last night, I could hear my wife sobbing for the majority of the night. Only our youngest has attempted to communicate with her. The others have stayed away from her. I'm going to propose that she remain with her sister until we can complete the divorce, if I can muster the confidence to do so. However, she still calls this place home. If we all have to live with her, it will only be a sad situation. You were all right about my wife, and I was incorrect. I was mistaken about every year we spent together, every memory, and every moment that changed our lives. I thought she would fall to her knees and ask for forgiveness. I really believed that she would confess the truth and repent for everything that had happened over the previous 4 years, thus clearing her of any blame. We are not worth it to this woman, who once drove back to a farmer's market after realizing she had been handed $10 more in change than she was supposed to. She doesn't value me, perhaps I never was. What comes next? It was really unpleasant at home today. The daughters and I made an effort to continue as we had for the previous 2 weeks, but it is obviously not feasible. All I want to do is move on from this whole situation, from the divorce to the uncomfortable conversations to the anticipated battles, arguments, and drama. How did you handle having to live with your WS, especially if you have children? I am aware that this is only the start. I keep reading blogs that say things will get better, but I'm a long way from that. Right now, I can't stop wanting to yell at every opportunity. Naturally, I'm making every effort to keep the girls' minds calm, but I'm not sure whether I can sustain it for 3 months. Before all of this is finished, school will begin. This is my life now, I suppose. I appreciate everyone's strong interest in me. I'm not sure if the worst is over or not, but I would appreciate any help you can give me to get through this next stage. Update 5. Since my WW returned home and I found out about her affair, I've been in a horrible mood. For my daughters, I've been doing my best to pretend. I make an effort to think and speak appropriately, but tonight I must face the reality. It comes in waves, as many of you post every day, but tonight I was struck by a very large one and became somewhat agitated. My WW has yet to get a lawyer despite the divorce being filed. And once more, I'm attempting to be as gentle and patient as I can in this situation because I'm beginning to see the possibility of an uncontested divorce that we primarily manage ourselves. But I'm not sure after tonight. We've been living together throughout the week, and because WW works so near to our family home, she spends Friday evenings at her sister's and Sunday nights at home. However, if there is no traffic, her sister is an hour away. It's been a habit of basically avoidance over the past few weeks, with WW essentially keeping to herself and the girls and I trying to go about our daily lives regularly. Even though we have informal conversations every evening, my oldest daughter and my WW have stopped talking after a few heated arguments. Right now, it's for the best. I've been following a lot of your advice lately, in addition to what I've read. I put a lot of effort into maintaining my self-control around my wife, and even though it requires all of my strength and willpower, I've been brief and uninterested in our small conversations, although always being courteous and respectful. The past 2 Fridays, up until now, she has arrived home from work, gathered a few things, and left for her sister's for the weekend before I have even returned from work. Not tonight though. When I got home, she was waiting for me in the kitchen. I attempted to ignore her tonight, but she gently took my hand and asked if I was going to treat her this way because she wasn't ready to discuss her affair with me. By the way, since everything went viral about a month ago, this is the first time she has ever spoken about her infidelity. I made an effort. I swear to you, I tried to just walk away and bite my tongue, but I became angry because our daughters weren't home at the time. I then released all of my vices, hurts, aches, anger, and miseries. I let her handle everything. I went on for so long I can't even remember. I completely forgot what time was. I did become a little animated and loud at times, and I did raise my voice. I simply broke down and told her how devastated I am, how much pain I endure every day, and everything that has been haunting me and that I have been holding back. I mean, if I tried to summarize what I said, this piece would be 4,000 words long. I had no intention of stopping once I got rolling. Naturally, I broke down and became tearful once more. After this, I was furious with myself. Damn it, I've been doing great. She reached me. I allowed her to affect me. I was aware that it would occur. I was aware. Horrible. I can only express so much in the waiting room, and it has been building for a while. Additionally, WW genuinely broke down and became emotional for the first time. She started crying furiously, which surprised me. Unfortunately, seeing that she was experiencing the same pain as I was made me pleased. I wish I didn't care, but it felt good to watch her finally cry since it showed that there was someone with some empathy inside of her. Surprisingly, she apologized several times as I was exploding. She would only mutter, "I'm so sorry," while sobbing in an awful way. Eventually, though, I left the kitchen before she could gather herself enough to say anything more. I begged her to stop bothering me. That's what occurred. She spent some time in the kitchen before heading back to her sister's house. After a half hour, the girls realized something had happened when they got home. Although it's difficult to conceal, I wasn't prepared to discuss anything and don't believe they should be aware of this. Do they? I don't want to stop the 2 youngest from making development because they have been doing a lot better. I also don't want to add fuel to my oldest's fury by telling her about this. I detest this so much. I detest it. I ought to have remained composed. I should have simply ignored my WW and walked straight by her. Right now, I'm not sure. Looking back, it seems like she was merely attempting to bring up her affair but was unsure of how to do so. Obviously, she didn't go very far because I blew out. I am now genuinely concerned for her. I don't want her to suffer any harm, but I am aware that many of you will be critical of me for this. With almost everyone ignoring her, she has been alone with her thoughts and secluded. Although it's true that she deserves it, she is still a person and the mother of my children. What a blow to me. I'm really disappointed in myself. I apologize for the lengthy tirade. I also yelled at my brother over the phone. I'll try to start over on Monday, man. I'm only a human. I must admit that it felt wonderful to vent to her, but now I'm feeling regret. Is it better to text my wife or to ignore her? I'm a complete wreck. However, I appreciate you listening, providing me with the help I need to get through this, and giving me all of your suggestions. We have all begun treatment, so that's something in the middle of the turmoil. But this is really, really difficult, just really difficult. Update 6. Thank you for your concern. I am aware that many of you have contacted me. The majority of you were right. Things aren't going well, and I haven't had any opportunity to access the internet. I was hoping to take a vacation from the internet, but I've been regressing a lot this week. It has simply been terrible. My wife has been really kind and has been apologizing for her affair, crying, smothering me, and knocking on my door at night to talk. She hasn't really left me alone this week. I've spoken to her when I felt like it, but I've also mostly ignored her. On Wednesday night, I finally lost my temper with her and told her to stop bothering me. Then it occurred last night. After her affair blew up, my soon-to-be ex-wife returned home a little more than a month ago. Now that we've started this awkward cohabitation routine, she came into my room after the daughters had gone to bed and begged to speak with me alone. In contrast to how she had been approaching me all week, I fed her first, but in order to avoid making the same mistake twice in front of the kids, we finally went to the garage and sat in my car. I apologize for the lengthy apology. She filled me in on everything. We spent about 3 hours out there, she said. I'm not sure how much to divulge. I couldn't sleep, so I stayed up all night listening to her cry again. I also shed tears. I would then become so enraged that I would have to force myself not to walk in and yell at her. Then sob, then rage, and so forth. I apologize if I don't reply to anyone for a day or so, but I need to get this off my chest before I try to sleep. Having my WW apologize and ask for another chance all the time hasn't helped. I had to leave for a few hours tonight as well in order to avoid her. Simply put, being around her hurt so much. In any case, her sister introduced her to her AP approximately 5 years prior to COVID, seemingly with no romantic ambitions. However, he was a higher up at the company she presently works for and wanted to work for. She was able to convince him that her affair was not the reason behind her wish to change careers. However, it goes without saying that she had more motivation after changing employment. The AP started flirting with her once she was hired. Texting at first, followed by images, and then more texting. Then, right before COVID struck, things got physical. She wanted to tell me right away after confessing to her sister, but she chose to keep it to herself. Naturally, my wife claimed that she went NC with her AP shortly after, but he contacted her again as soon as the limitations and lockdowns were relaxed, and she continued to speak with him until the physical aspect of the affair resurfaced. She claimed to have halted the affair a few times out of remorse once businesses resumed operations, but she continued returning to him, thus it never ended. In essence, she provided a great deal of information. She recited the full 5-page packet of handwritten notes detailing her affair history, responding to questions as she went. She made false claims about weekend getaways with the girls, work-related travel, traffic bottlenecks, problems with her parents, shopping excursions, etc. The list was long, as I had expected. She told me so many falsehoods that I simply believed everything she said without question. They were merely a front to be with him though. It only made me feel worse to hear it all. Everyone was right. Her love, however, never truly wavered. She never became aloof during all of this, unlike what I frequently read. Although intimacy did shift, it wasn't enough for me to raise concerns. In any case, she acknowledges that she fell in love with AP and desired a life with him. He promised her luxury items, trips, and everything he could do for her. He was older, divorced, and unmarried. She claimed that the excitement of being with him was too great to resist and began to fantasize about fleeing her duties with the family. She remarked about how the everyday routines of family life bored her. She appeared to be honest, quite emotional, and extremely open. Halfway through, I started crying and lost my temper. As you can think, hearing it all hurt. Naturally, once she finished her confession, she told me how much she loved me and always would, and that she would stop at nothing to try to keep the marriage intact. Many of you anticipated this, yet it all seems so phony to me, as if it had been practiced. Having spent more than half of my life with this woman, I can detect when she is acting shady. I think it doesn't matter if I'm mistaken, but I was more composed than I was the week before. Nevertheless, I became irate and said a few hurtful things, such as making fun of her AP for having several girlfriends, of whom she was only one that he was prepared to discard. She appeared pretty offended about that. When I think about this moment, when she would finally reveal all the one-liners I might say to her or things I could say to hurt her back, a million thoughts crossed my mind. I couldn't think of hundreds of answers during the emotional moment the other night, but I knew I would ask. If AP were still alive and she had to choose between me and him, who would she pick? She hesitated and then whispered, "That's not fair." I pressed the subject, and then she eventually stated she'd, of course, select me. In reaction, I said that she was lying again, which was why I was divorcing her. The last thing she said was that she began to cry. We spent some time in the automobile. She continued to cry, but I was exhausted, so I simply informed her that we were divorcing and that we owed it to the kids to be there in their lives, to be good parents, and to get along amicably. In addition, I said that I hoped she was a decent enough person to end our divorce amicably and fairly after all the suffering she had caused me. That would demonstrate her true affection for me. Please realize that I'm not a petty person and that I didn't intentionally mean to hurt her when I told her that I had stolen anything from another website. It just seemed like the right way to wrap things up. However, I truly meant what I said and did. After telling her that I would have loved her forever and leaning over to kiss her on the forehead, I got out of the car and went to bed. That was it. Naturally, I didn't get much sleep the night before, and now I'm having trouble falling asleep tonight. I have no idea what will happen next. One positive, I suppose, is that she no longer has the chance to challenge the divorce. However, I have yet to speak with my attorney. I'm crying once more and reverting to my angry and depressed states. Hearing everything last night was really difficult, even though I could have avoided it all. She may have lied and made it up too, now that I know. Who knows? However, it appeared to go well with everything I had assembled during the previous month. For the time being, that's it. It seems like this never ends. I feel strong again after a few good days, and then something else happens. Even though it's only been days, it feels like months have passed. However, I will attempt to get some rest. Imagine that the one lady you have ever loved and kissed, the love of your life, informs you that she cheated on you for more than 4 years because she was bored. Had no relationship problems, no dead bedroom, no falling out of love, no growing apart, nothing of the sort. Merely due to her boredom. I'm not sure if that makes it better or worse. Thank you for reading and for your assistance. It was a rough couple of nights. Horrible. My wife wants a divorce because I live an entirely different reality with my first love in my dreams. Original post. I, M31, have been with my wife, F28, for 3 years. We had a short engagement, married quickly, and had a perfectly ordinary existence. I love her, she loves me. We do taxes, housework, watch movies. All the normal things. No physical cheating on either side as far as I know. But here's the thing. I am a lucid dreamer, which means I can, to an extent, control my dreams, which is something I find cool as it allows me to go on adventures while asleep. It also makes scary dreams not so bad because I can just wake myself out of them. Over the last year or so I've been having a recurring dream about my ex, my first love, F29. Truth be told, I never got over her. We were together for 5 years from 15-17 to 2022. We broke up after I graduated from college because she didn't want to move from New York to South Carolina with me, which is where the biggest industry for my field is. I was crushed but moved on, and we've spoken sporadically over the years, although we never crossed any lines. I will admit that I've kept up with her own social media a bit, but nothing stalkerish. Well, a year ago she announced she was getting married and I experienced a resurgence of feelings for her, although I never acted on them or told her. That same night, I dreamed about her for the first time in years. In the dream she showed up at my door and asked me if I wanted to get coffee. I said yes, of course. The dream, which was not a lucid dream, ended there. It felt so real, I couldn't shake the feeling once I woke up. It felt like we were actually reconnecting. Since then I've dreamed about her several times a week and I've practiced becoming lucid, so I've been able to control the outcome more times than not. We've lived a whole life together over the past year. Everything from dates to a trip to Paris together, which we visited while in college. We even rewalked the same paths we did in real life. It got to the point I was looking forward to going to sleep to be with her. Fast forward to today, my wife told me she felt distant from me. And I started to feel guilty because I thought what I was doing was harmless, but she's obviously noticed a change in me. So I confessed. About all of it. At first she said that I was joking, but when she realized I was serious, she accused me of cheating on her and told her mom and sisters, who are calling me a cheating weirdo. She even threatened to tell my ex so she'll know what a fucking loser I am. Now I get that it's not anything a woman would want to hear, but it's not like I physically cheated. I don't want to lose my wife, but I don't think she can forgive me for this. TLDR, I live an entirely separate life with my ex in my dreams, and now my wife wants to divorce me. But I really love her and don't want to lose her. Do we have a chance? Relevant comments. Sulangelic. Yeah, no, I think this might be a lost cause. I would certainly consider this cheating, and I think that it does indeed warrant a divorce. You clearly don't really love her, at least, not as much as you love your ex. OWAP, I do love my wife, which is why I married her. I just also have feelings for my ex, which I should have been honest about before we got married. I didn't mean for this to happen, but once it did I wasn't able to stop it. Living that life with my ex while sleeping felt like getting to experience what I missed out on in young adulthood. With that said, my wife left overnight for a hotel and I don't know if she's coming back. I feel awful for hurting her. Elzabot, I'm asking this genuinely, Not trying to be snarky at all. What did you think your wife's reaction was going to be? Did you expect what happened, or did you think she would be more accepting? I knew she would be upset, but I felt I owed her an explanation once she communicated that Do felt distant. I didn't want to gaslight her perception. I just hadn't known that she even noticed a difference in me. I just didn't think she would leave. She's turned off her location. I have no idea where she is or if she's all right, and her family won't speak to me now. I do love her and would like for our marriage not to end, but that seems inevitable now as I process this. Update. 2 days ago, I posted about the fallout that occurred after I, 31, admitted to my wife, 28, that I've been lucid dreaming about my ex and first love, 29, over the past year. After a major blow-up, where my wife called me every name in the book, and got her family involved, which I understand completely, so please don't take this wrong, my wife left. I didn't know her whereabouts for over 24 hours. Early this morning about 3 a.m., she came home and told me she wanted to file for divorce. She didn't want to have to compete with a phantom, and deserved better than a shitbag like me. But she doesn't want to move out or start the process because it's a pandemic, and she doesn't want to live on one income. We make roughly the same amount of money. Me $90,000 a year after taxes, and her $85,000. I tried to apologize to her for all the hurt I caused by making her feel like she wasn't enough, to assure her that I do love her even though I still love my ex, and explain to her that I've never physically cheated or had any inappropriate conversation with my ex. But she won't budge. She doesn't want me anymore. I can't blame her. I was selfish and I shouldn't have carried on what I now accept to be a one-sided emotional affair. So I agreed to stay together, for financial purposes, for 2 years, or until the pandemic is over, whichever comes first. But she kicked me out of our bedroom and basically claimed the second floor for herself. There's so much tension in the house right now, so I left as soon as the sun came up and went to a coffee shop to do some work. While there, I received a message on IG from my ex that my ex-wife sent her a long message from her own account telling her about everything that I told her. I froze because I hadn't spoken to her in a long time. But she saw that I had read the message and followed up an hour later, telling me she needed to know the truth. So, again, I confessed, expecting to be berated and called a loser again. Because I had nothing else to lose. But she didn't think that my dreams about her were weird or creepy. She thought it was sweet that I still loved her, especially with her knowing that I'd never tried to have inappropriate conversations or force my way into her life. I'm aware that her not condemning my actions doesn't make them right or take away from the hurt I caused my wife, but knowing she didn't think negatively of me made me feel better. We messaged back and forth for a couple of hours, talking about our relationship and how it ended and the choices we made. In that, I learned that she and her fiancé called off their engagement a few months ago. I also told her my wife was going to divorce me because of the revelation. She expressed her condolences, and that was the end of the conversation. I'm home now, and I can't help but wonder if this is the universe's way of putting my ex and I back on the path to reconciliation. Hate me if you want, but I made a mistake and I hurt my wife, and my marriage is over now. Or going to be. But knowing that the person I ruined my marriage over doesn't think I'm the scum of the earth is worth its weight in gold. I don't know what will happen now. But I can't imagine a friendship with my ex won't blossom from this, at the very least. I know this won't make my wife happy since she contacted my ex to further shame me, but I may just not tell her. We are, after all, divorcing. I hope the next few months and years can result in healing for both my wife and myself, and that we'll both live happy, fulfilled lives. TLDR, I live an entirely separate life with my ex in my dreams, and now my wife wants to divorce me. Now my ex and I have reconnected. Relevant comments, deleted. I hope you don't take it out on her when you realize that your old flame isn't the person she was in your dreams. Because that was you. You were in love with another version of you. She'll be someone else entirely. Oh, but I'm also a different person. And I wasn't in love with myself. The love for her influenced the dreams. Deleted. When I say she'll be someone else entirely, I don't mean that your ex will have changed since you last knew her. I mean that your ex, in actual, real life, will be someone other than the person you spent so much time with in your dreams. That person in your dreams was not your ex in any meaningful way. She was an amalgamation of your memories of her, patched together using new material you created out of whole cloth to please yourself. She won't ever be able to live up to the fantasy you constructed, because the fantasy woman was you. The things she did and said were things you invented, just like every character an author writes is a version of themselves. You've invested countless hours and serious emotion into a character you created, who is really only loosely based on your ex. Since a real woman can't read your mind like a dream character can, and because a real woman doesn't exist only to make you happy, she will not, in real life, be the same person from your dreams. That may be disappointing to you when you realize it, so try not to take it out on the girl. OP fair. But I'm not expecting her to be. The dream could never compare to the warmth and love she radiates in real life. It was a coping mechanism. Real life will be better. I love sharks 101. You sound absolutely obsessed with this woman, and to be honest it's quite disturbing. I imagine much of who she is has changed over the years. What if she's not the person you remembered? She will never compare to the fantasy, and honestly your obsession over her perfection is rather frightening. My boyfriend's meltdown over my friend's age turns into a breakup after his sexist comments and refusal to own up. Original post: I've been dating my boyfriend Mike, fake name, for about 4 months and everything has been great up until now. This post is gonna make Mike sound kind of crazy, but up till now he's been the nicest, most laid-back guy I've ever dated. About a week ago I was on a Zoom call with 2 of my friends, who we will call Annie and Sarah. Sarah is 27, Annie is 36. I was talking to Annie and Sarah and Mike leaned over my shoulder to say hello. Because of the pandemic he hasn't met either of them in person yet and it was his first time actually meeting Annie at all. I wanted him to get to know my friends a bit so I invited him to sit next to me and stick around. Sarah was talking about her dating woes and how the pandemic has made it harder to date than ever. Mike made this weird joke about how Sarah needs to find a guy quickly because at 30 she's gonna hit the wall and no man will want her anymore. He said it in this joking voice, but both Annie and Sarah looked weirded out. To be honest, Mike's never said anything like that before. I guess Mike picked up on the awkwardness because he started trying to explain himself and started saying all this stuff about how women age like milk and it's not the same for guys and men who tend to date younger because after 30 they hold all the cards and can pick and choose. Annie said, I haven't had any trouble meeting men. And Mike said, just wait until you hit 30 and lose your looks, it's all downhill from there. Annie just kind of laughed and I had to tell Mike that she's 36, and obviously hasn't lost her looks if he's mistaking her for a 20-something. I said it kind of jokingly but Mike just went silent and then walked off into my bedroom and slammed the door. That night and ever since then he's been very moody and short with me, and keeps making passive-aggressive comments about how I'm always against him and never have his back. We've never even had an argument before this so I don't know where that's coming from. I've tried to bring up the Annie thing several times and he either clams up and refuses to talk about it or turns it back to me, Annie and Sarah ganging up on him and bullying him, which I don't think any of us did. The rest of the time he's just very short with me and keeps picking fights over tiny stupid things like my tone of voice being wrong. What do I do here? I really want to talk about what happened and about his views on women and men and aging because that's kinda concerning. I don't understand why my sweet cool boyfriend has suddenly transformed into this weirdo because he got politely corrected once. How should I solve this? TLDR. Boyfriend started talking about how my friend would be washed up when she hits 30. I told him she's 36 and he's been in a bad mood ever since. What should I do? Relevant comments. Kfail shot 123 WTF. Sounds like your BF is a shallow pause. I mean, he was seriously looking for you to back him up that older women always fall apart. If that's what he really thinks, then your relationship is over in 2 years anyways. Smack up upside the head, tell him to grow up, and y'all can move on from this. This the dumbest non-issue I've ever heard in my life. Your boyfriend is being a bitch and he sounds like the type of person that is loaded up with double standards. Oh. That went through my mind too and is part of why I want to talk to him about this because if he really thinks women are washed up after 30 then what does that mean for our relationship? Spoem lol he sounds like a sexist dumbass and that he's upset, he got proven wrong? Oh, P. What's weird is he's never shown any hint of being sexist before this. If you'd asked me before all this I would have told you he was a very modern and progressive guy, and it's not like we've never discussed things where he could have shown these kinds of views before. We discussed stuff like abortion and women's reproductive rights early on, and he was all about a woman's right to choose, for example. This just seems like it came from nowhere. Tasty units. How is this loser even attractive to you? I hope you talked to Annie and apologized for his behavior. If I were Annie, I would be incredibly disappointed in you. OP. I stayed on the Zoom call with Annie after he stormed off so we already talked about it and I basically said the truth, which is that he's never ever said anything like that before and I wouldn't date him if he had. Annie seemed to find him saying all that stuff then getting her age wrong incredibly funny actually, but yeah I did apologize for what Mike said to both her and Sarah. Deleted. Once I heard the phrase, when people show you who they really are, believe them, it changed my life. Listen to who he is showing you he is OP. Edit. To give credit, it's a Maya Angelou quote. Thanks to everyone that told me. OOP. I think I'm going to take your advice. It makes me sad because he really seemed so great up until now, but I guess this is a lesson to me that you can't always trust the first impression you get of someone. I texted him that I want to talk, so I guess either he can respond and we can have an actual adult breakup in person, or he can keep ignoring me and get dumped by text tomorrow. Update. First of all, I want to say thank you. I didn't expect my post to get such a big reaction, but seeing everyone basically unanimously tell me Mike was bad news was the wake-up call I needed. As a matter of fact, it was actually Sarah who told me to make the post. She didn't like Mike at all after that Zoom call, and I had been kind of pushing back when she suggested I end the relationship. She didn't sound surprised at all when I told her Reddit unanimously said he was bad news. I think she was probably thinking I told you so. I also called my dad after the Reddit post, and something he said basically cemented my decision to end it with Mike. He and my mom are the same age and have been happily married for 30 years. He said, if you stay with this man, then on your 30th birthday, you're going to be worrying he'll never find you beautiful again instead of celebrating the milestone. Don't waste your time with someone like that. Every time your mom has her birthday, I feel happy that she's choosing to spend another year growing older with me. And basically, that's what I want. And obviously I wasn't going to have that with Mike. Anyway, long story short, I did break up with Mike. I texted him asking to meet up and talk, and when he asked what about, I told him we needed to discuss the Zoom call and how he'd been acting this week. I got more of the same stuff about how I'm a bully and ganging up on him, and he wants an apology from me, and even though I had wanted to do the breakup in person, I realized he was going to keep trying to turn it around into being my fault, so I just told him over text that I didn't want to see him anymore. He sent back, whatever. Grow up, and hasn't contacted me since. So that's that. Not a very interesting update, I know. But even though a big explosive argument might have been a more interesting update, I'm kind of glad to have avoided it. TLDR, I broke up with Mike. Relevant comments. Theora4545. Good thing done. Now for her to reconcile with her friend and tell her dad what great support they both are. OP. Sarah's not mad at me, fortunately. We actually had a call just before I made this update, but I can tell she was holding back the urge to say she told me so. And to be fair, she did tell me so. Pookie582. I'm sorry it had to happen, but I am relieved this is the outcome. I hope you find someone a million times better. Also, I love your dad. He sounds like a great husband and a great father. OP. My dad's amazing, and he and my mom are still so crazy about each other. They've always been marriage goals for me. My father crushes my dreams to protect the golden child and refuses to pay for my tuition, but I get my sweet revenge. I have a younger brother, 28, and we were raised by our dad, 56, ever since we were in middle school. My dad has always favored my brother over me, and with time, I got used to it. I was never the kind of son that my dad wanted because, unlike him, I had no interest in sports or doing the typical macho stuff that boys do. I was always more into more typically feminine things, which is why I was a huge mama's boy growing up. I loved everything to do with the kitchen, reading books, and even singing. My dad tried to make me play football with him, but I was no good at it, so gradually we grew apart. My brother, on the other hand, was exactly the kind of son that my father wanted. He was a rough and tough boy, not afraid of getting dirty while playing or even getting hurt. He was the perfect son for my dad, and it was very obvious that he loved my brother way more than he loved me. He'd always have great things to say about my brother, but never me. My mother, however, never played favorites. She was fair to both of us, and that's why I loved her more as well. I did put in an effort to befriend my dad and spend time with him, but once we'd grown apart, he didn't seem too keen on fixing our relationship either. Unfortunately, the glue holding our messed up family together, my mother, passed away when I was in 8th grade. She'd been suffering from cancer, and by the time we realized it, it was too late for her to be saved. She was gone before we knew it. My mother's passing pretty much devastated me, and I kind of spiraled during that time. My only solace was the kitchen, and I'd whip up something new every day as if my life depended on it. My mother was a great cook, and she'd tell me often that had she not been forced into taking over her dad's business, she probably would have become a chef. So cooking was the only thing that brought me any comfort, since my dad and brother were no help in dealing with my feelings. They suppressed any emotional reaction they'd had to my mother's passing, and if anything, grew even more distant from me when, in normal families, something like this would have brought us closer. My fixation on cooking pissed my dad off even more, and he'd keep bugging me to get out of the damn kitchen and do something more manly. One day, when he'd had enough, he even told me that if he saw me in the kitchen again, he'd make me do all the other household chores as well. He told me to be more like my brother and man up, which ended in a huge fight where I told him he never loved me, and he agreed to it. It was finally out in the open, and I guess it was pretty much the last day that my father and I spoke to each other so openly, because after that, I stopped trying to win him over altogether, and he didn't seem to care about it either. For the next few years, I spent all the time I had in my room, listening to music and studying new recipes. I was determined to make this whole chef thing work out, not just for myself, but also for my mother. Meanwhile, my dad and I only spoke when it was absolutely necessary. My brother didn't care about me much either and ignored me, just like our dad did. So after my mom passed away, I basically had nobody I could count on. Finally, when it was time for me to apply to colleges, I decided to apply to a few of the top culinary schools as well as normal colleges, so that I'd at least have a shot. I didn't know if my dad would agree to it, but I had to try. At the very least, I'd already interned at a restaurant secretly that summer and had some experience. I had even managed to make them write a recommendation letter for me, which helped greatly. I ended up getting accepted into several of the schools I had applied to, including one of the best, which just so happened to be in France. I was thrilled that this was finally happening for me, but I was equally nervous since this would mean having to ask my dad for permission. I'd already made up my mind to beg him to let me go if he seemed reluctant, because I just absolutely had to make this happen for myself. I wasn't prepared to give up on my dreams under any circumstances. So I did tell my father about it eventually, and while I was ready for him to reject my request, saying that it wasn't a masculine profession, I was absolutely not prepared for him to decline paying my tuition at all. I still remember being really confused when he told me that he wouldn't be paying for my education at all, since it wasn't as if my dad was poor in the slightest. As a matter of fact, he was pretty well off and could easily afford to send me to France, but money wasn't the reason he wasn't ready to pay for my tuition. It was the fact that if I went to France and joined such a reputable school, it would make my younger brother feel insecure. He was struggling with his grades and couldn't bring himself to focus, so my dad wanted me to either go to community college or find a way to pay for my own tuition. I was astonished that he would do something so cruel to his own son and didn't know what to say to him. I tried to tell him that I needed this, but he was hell-bent and absolutely unwilling to pay for my tuition. He even told me that my brother's well-being was his topmost priority and that he didn't want me competing with his son. I could hardly even believe that this was happening because I couldn't imagine any other father in the world crushing their child's dreams like this just for their favorite. After a lot of pleading and sobbing, when he still refused to budge, I ended up getting into a huge fight with him where I said a lot of things to him and then left his house for good. I started living with my maternal aunt, my mother's older sister, instead. The only reason I hadn't moved out earlier was because I found comfort in the house where I'd grown up with my mom and also because I didn't want to change schools, which I'd have to do if I moved in with my aunt, since she lived pretty far away from the high school I went to. I told her all about my dad and how he'd outright refused to pay my tuition, and that I needed her help. It felt like crap asking her for a ton of money since she wasn't as rich as my dad, but she reassured me that she'd take care of all my expenses. Somehow, she managed to get all her friends to pitch in and sent me to the culinary school of my dreams, and I'm always going to be grateful for that. Once I got there, I worked part-time as well and tried to make the most of my time there to make all the money that was being spent on me worth it. I worked really, really hard and made my way up. When I graduated, I was one of the most skilled chefs there and even got a job just a few months after I graduated. I started working at a really high-end French restaurant, and I sent half of my salary back to my aunt to repay whatever debt I had. Slowly but steadily, I was just lucky that I didn't have to rely on a student loan, or maybe I'd never be able to pay any of it off. Anyway, I worked in France for a few years before finally moving back home, once I'd saved up enough to open up my own restaurant. It's been a couple of years, and in the meantime, I worked at another restaurant here as the head chef while also working towards my goal of opening up my own restaurant someday. It was all finalized a few weeks ago, and I was able to finally open up the restaurant I'd been working towards for so long. Two of my friends from back when I was in France also joined in on my business idea and became co-owners with me, which is why I was grateful when they allowed me to choose what we were going to name the restaurant. They happened to be from the same state, so we were all okay with opening our restaurant in my city of choice as well. I chose to name it after my mother, which was a really lucky coincidence for us since my mother actually has a really beautiful and uncommon name in the city we called our home. It was all finally falling into place. A few days back, we even had a little party for a few select guests before we were officially open for business. Of course, I invited my aunt and a few of her friends who'd also pitched in to help pay for my tuition. I also invited some of my friends back from school, but that was pretty much it. I didn't invite my father and brother because of obvious reasons. Even if I'd wanted to, I couldn't have since I hadn't spoken to them ever since I'd left home, and neither had they bothered to ever get back in touch with me. I guess all of us were better off this way, but I should have known that they would definitely show up to piggyback on my success someday. And that's exactly what happened. At the party we threw, they showed up an hour before the party was due to begin but weren't stopped by security since we shared the last name. They claimed that they were here to surprise me, and at least that bit was true. I was definitely surprised when I saw them. My dad and brother greeted me like nothing awful had ever happened in the past and were really warm towards me, probably for the first time in my entire life. I was shocked to see them, so I just froze when they first entered the restaurant. My buddies noticed that something was off, and after politely greeting my family, they left us on our own. I'm thankful that they were able to pick up on my discomfort. I still hadn't recovered from the shock of seeing them again when they dropped another bomb on me and showed me a gift that they'd brought for me. It was a portrait of my mother, and my dad even told me that he commissioned it for me to hang up in my restaurant. As soon as he'd heard that a new fancy restaurant with this name was opening up in our city, he'd known that it was definitely none other than his son. He even told me that he'd always known that I had it in me. My brother, too, was jumping on the bandwagon and praising me, telling me that he was immensely proud of me. I couldn't believe my ears and knew instantly that something was very strange about all of this. I didn't say much and kept waiting for them to get to the point because I knew there must have been a reason for them to be here. I let them speak, and eventually, they did get to the reason they were here. Apparently, my brother was working as a bartender now, and even that was possible just because my dad had managed to convince a friend of his to give him a job at his club. My brother's grades had kept falling throughout high school and college, and that's why he didn't end up in the high-paying positions my dad had always expected from him. On top of that, he'd also been slacking during his high school football games, which is why he wasn't able to get a sports scholarship either. Ironically, he's the one who ended up having to go to community college because he got rejected everywhere else. What they wanted me to do was make my brother a partner in the business so that he'd have a more respectable position, even though he had done absolutely zilch to deserve it. I had the urge to laugh in their face but somehow managed to hold back and instead told them that I'd think about it. I wasn't going to think about it though. I just didn't want to turn them away. I wanted them to stay for the party because I had a much better plan in mind, to humiliate my family, who'd come out of the woodwork as soon as they received word of my success. They seemed reasonably pleased, but boy, oh boy, they had no idea what was about to come. After a while, our guests started arriving, and in an hour or so, everyone we'd invited was there. I spent the evening socializing while my dad and brother also did the same, and I even heard them boasting about me to a few people while I marveled at their sheer audacity. Towards the end of the party, it was time for the hosts, namely me and my partners, to give a toast. My friends went first since I wanted to save the best for last. Then, finally, it was my turn to speak. That day, I was finally going to speak my heart out. I started off by thanking all my guests and raised a drink to my mother first since she was the reason I'd even ever been able to achieve so much. I strongly believed that it was her faith in me as a child that had made me believe I could do any of this at all, and that had stayed with me even after she was gone. After I'd paid my due respects, I decided to get to the real respect as well. I brought up how I'd had to take a loan from my aunt and her friends to go to culinary school and thanked her as well. Then finally, I got to the reason I'd had to take a loan for my tuition in the first place, my family. I brought up how I'd grown up with a father who never loved me or had any faith in me, and always berated me for having feminine interests like cooking. I had a younger brother who was the replica of my dad. I told them all about how my dad had refused to pay for my tuition out of fear that I'd end up becoming more successful than my younger brother, who was his golden child. This is why I ended up leaving home, but despite all odds, I was able to rise and become who I am today. So in a way, they did deserve some credit for creating all the hardships I've had to face. Otherwise, I never would have found out how resilient I was. A lot of people shot my dad and brother the nastiest looks they could manage while I was saying all of this, and even they had the good sense to at least look ashamed, even though I knew that they didn't feel that way in the slightest. Anyway, I then walked over to my dad and brother and actually hugged them, putting up the same pretense that they had when they visited me today. "Two can play this game," I announced. Because you'd shown up to celebrate my success today, I'd forgiven them for whatever had happened in the past, and I was even ready to give my brother the job of a bartender at my restaurant. To other people, this obviously seemed like a really emotional reconciliation, and they ended up actually clapping for me at the end of my speech. There were a few wolf whistles. Only my family and I knew that this was nothing more than an attempt to humiliate them, which I'd done quite successfully. But they had to smile and act like they were super grateful for what I'd done since they couldn't exactly storm out angrily, which is exactly what they wanted to do. After a while, when the crowd had cleared out and it was finally time for us to go home, my dad and brother confronted me right outside my restaurant. They were furious, and I swear there were angry tears in my brother's eyes. They demanded an explanation for what I'd done. If I'd never intended on making my brother a partner, then I should have just turned them away as soon as they arrived. I just laughed and told them that this was my form of paying them back for everything they'd done for me over the years. This is exactly what you deserve. Then I walked away and didn't bother to look back, even when I heard my brother crying about how this was the cruelest thing, and even yelling after me to tell me that I'd regret this. But I didn't care since I was already in my car and was driving away. That happened a couple of days ago, and I haven't heard from them since. My aunt thinks that I might have gone a little too far with this one and should have just kicked them out at first, but I don't agree with her. This was well deserved. I'd had enough of humiliating my father and brother. Update 1. Hey, I decided not to reach out to my family to apologize, in spite of what my aunt had said about me being way too harsh. I don't feel sorry about what I did, so I'm not going to pretend I do and go out of my way to say so. They could have taken the opportunity to apologize to me when they visited me, but they didn't. I explained this to my aunt as well, and while she still believes I shouldn't have done what I did, she hasn't said much about it. I guess this is just one of those areas where we agree to disagree, and I'm okay with that. In other news, my brother has made sure that he goes behind my back to talk crap about me to all our friends from school. It's unfortunate that we went to the same high school, since this just means that random strangers from school are now texting to confirm the rumors that I'd humiliated and then kicked out my dad and brother from my restaurant after feeding them 3-day-old food on purpose. Yeah, he exaggerated the story to make himself seem like the victim, which is pretty unsurprising. Ordinarily, I wouldn't care about petty rumors, but I don't want potential customers taking these rumors seriously. So, I've texted my brother that if he doesn't stop spreading lies about me and my restaurant, then I'll make sure that he loses the job he has right now too. I'm hoping that it works because I really don't feel like dealing with their unnecessary crap right now. I'm really busy with work, and this just isn't the time. Update 2. LOL, my brother texted back saying that he was going to stop only when I'd make him a partner. I don't even understand what level of idiocy and delusion this is. Besides, if he wants to be a partner, then isn't it a pretty stupid idea for him to be talking crap about the same restaurant? I'm pretty sure this is my dad's tactic to ensure his darling son lands a high-profile job without doing any real work. But unfortunately, it's not going to work with me. I've told him that if he doesn't stop, then he'll be hearing from my lawyers and that he's in absolutely no position to be negotiating with me right now. The only reason I haven't done anything yet is because I don't want to get caught up in unnecessary drama, but I'll definitely mess him up if he tries anything funny after this, and he should take this as my last warning. I really hope he does, for his own good. Update 3. So, guys, it's been around a month since the last update, and since I've been really busy, I haven't been able to fill you in on what happened after that. My brother did stop talking crap about me behind my back, but they were still pretty desperate to join in on my success. So, my dad decided to pay me a visit with my brother a few weeks ago, just to intimidate me. They showed up at my house, threatening to sue me for using my mother's name for my restaurant, and even told me that they'd already spoken to a lawyer. So, if I didn't want any trouble, I needed to make my brother a partner as soon as possible. Obviously, I called their bluff immediately since no lawyer would take up such a stupid case. I think they were forgetting a very important fact. She was my mother too, and not just his wife. As far as I was concerned, no law could stop me from using her name. By then, I'd had enough of their bullcrap, so I told them that if they didn't leave me alone, they'd be forcing my hand, and I'd have no option but to call the cops. My brother lost his temper at that point and tried to grab me by the collar, but luckily, my dad held him back. I think it was the constant humiliation that had finally gotten to him and he'd snapped. Well, it wasn't my fault, and they were lucky that I didn't call the cops right then. I told my dad that he needed to get the hell out, but he only told my brother to go cool off in the car and that he wanted to speak to me in private. After my brother left, he tried to manipulate me by telling me that if my mother knew what I was doing to them, then she'd be really upset with me and I should bury the hatchet. At this point, I told him to leave me the hell alone because even I was at my limit. He couldn't just use my mother to get his way. That was just low. To be honest, we were way past the point of reconciliation. Not once had either of them apologized to me, even once, so I really didn't understand why they expected me to forgive them without even asking for it. As for what my mother would feel, I'm sure she would have felt equally let down back when my father had refused to pay for my tuition, and for that matter, every freaking time he made me feel awful about myself. So, he should be the last person to give me a sermon about what my mother would and wouldn't like. I know she's proud of me wherever she is, and nothing that my dad says is going to change that. At least my restaurant is doing well, and hopefully, we'll be able to expand soon enough. I found out my boyfriend and sister were secretly dating. I decided to get revenge and make them pay for how they treated me. Life has a tendency of delivering unexpected turns, don't you think? I never imagined that I'd be here sharing my heart with strangers online. Up until a month ago, I believed I had everything figured out. I'm a 48-year-old woman who lives in New York City. In addition to having a close-knit family and a loving boyfriend, I was the vice president of a prosperous advertising agency. Right now, nothing is certain to me now. It all began on what appeared to be a typical Tuesday. When I realized I had left my USB drive at home, I was in a hurry to attend to a crucial customer appointment. Not a huge thing, is it? I requested my sister Sarah, 44F, who was spending the week with us, to email me the files when I contacted her. I had no idea how much one small request would rock my world. My heart stopped when I opened Sarah's email. I was staring at private messages between her and my boyfriend, Tom, 45 megabytes, rather than my job files. I initially assumed it was some sort of twisted prank. But the terrible reality dawned on me as I read through the innumerable conversations. For the previous 6 months, my sister and my boyfriend had been having an affair. I had the feeling that I would get sick. I could hardly grasp my phone since my hands were shaking so much. In the hope that I was misinterpreting those messages, I must have read them a dozen times. However, everything was in black and white, including the inside jokes, the flirty banter, and the in-depth accounts of their covert meetings. How I handled that client encounter is beyond me. With my mind spinning from everything I had learned, I was operating automatically. I hurried home as soon as it was over, resolved to face Tom. He was sitting on the couch watching TV as if nothing were wrong when I stormed into our flat. My blood boiled at the sight of him, so careless and uninformed. How long? I threw my phone at him and demanded it. After a little period of confusion, his face became pale as he came to terms with what I had witnessed. He stammered, I don't know what you're talking about, but I could see the remorse on his face. Don't lie to me, Tom, I spit out. I noticed the messages. Sarah and you. For what duration has this been occurring? He initially made an effort to deny it, but as I recounted passages from their conversations, he broke down. He finally said, 6 months, in a voice that was almost audible above a whisper. It simply occurred. We didn't intend for it to, he said, but I interrupted. I didn't want to listen to his justifications. 6 months. A half year of deceit and treachery. He was with my sister when I was working late, assuming he was watching TV at home. I became physically nauseated at the prospect. I said, get out, my voice trembling with hurt and rage. I don't ever want to see you again. Tom remained silent. I was left alone in the apartment we had shared for the previous 2 years after he took a few items and departed. I started crying as soon as he left. I wept till my eyes were dry. After that, I sat there feeling empty and numb. How could they harm me like this? Since I was a young child, Sarah has been my best friend and sister. Growing up, we had shared everything, dreams, clothes, and secrets. What about Tom? He seemed like the one to me. We discussed getting married and creating a future together. Everything felt like a lie now. I gave Sarah a call the following day. To comprehend why she would betray me in this way, I wanted to hear it directly from her. I could tell she already knew when her face showed up on my screen. She appeared as though she hadn't slept because of her swollen, red eyes. She began. I'm so sorry. But I interrupted her. Why? With a chilly tone, I inquired. Why would you harm me in this way? As she attempted to explain, Sarah broke down and started crying. She sobbed. I didn't mean for it to happen. Tom and I simply clicked. I believe I'm in love with him, but I know that's no justification. Her remark struck me like a blow to the body. Are you in love with him? In love with my boyfriend, my own sister? In my stomach, it was like a knife twisting. Feeling more alone than ever, I hung up the phone without saying anything else. I contacted our parents, John, 55 million, and Mary, 53 feet, since I wanted to talk to someone in order to make sense of this mess. I believed that they would be sympathetic and supportive, and that they would be outraged on my behalf. Rather, their response made me feel even more deceived. My mom said, "Oh honey," after I told them everything. "Sarah probably didn't mean to cause you any harm. You are aware of her tendency toward impulsivity." What I was hearing was unbelievable. Didn't intend to cause me pain. She spent 6 months having sex with my boyfriend. Now, my father added. Let's not rush things. The most essential thing is family. If you all get together and have a conversation, I'm confident you can resolve this. Figure this out. Were they sincere? How could I simply forgive and go on from something like this? They obviously cared more about maintaining order than they did about my feelings. On top of everything else, their response felt like yet another betrayal. As the days went by, I saw that I alternated between intense fury and debilitating melancholy. I was unable to eat or sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tom and Sarah smiling together over their deception of me. My thoughts were consumed by the betrayal. I wasn't interested in playing happy families, but my parents kept calling to attempt to set up a family gathering to sort things out. How could I ever have faith in Tom or Sarah again? Knowing what my sister had done, how could I sit across from her at the dinner table? Something inside of me exploded during one of these phone conversations with my mother. When I cut her off, she was rambling on about forgiving others and moving on. No, I firmly answered. I won't act like everything is fine. They cannot be forgiven for what they did. But it's not healthy to hold on to anger, sweetie, she objected. You must. I need my family to realize how much I'm hurting, I interrupt. But I'm done because it's obvious that won't happen. I've had enough of Sarah. I've had enough of Tom. And this is the end of our talk. With my heart pounding, I hung up. I had clarity for the first time since this whole nightmare started. I had had enough of being the victim. I had to take charge of my life once more. I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer and called in sick to work the following day. As I told my narrative, Jessica, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, listened calmly and then leaned forward, her eyes concentrated and alert. You have choices, and you have been wronged, she continued. Given your professional relationship with Tom, we can investigate this from a number of perspectives, including emotional distress, breach of trust, and potentially even workplace harassment. I sensed hope, something I hadn't felt in weeks, as Jessica outlined possible tactics. Hope for justice, not for forgiveness or reconciliation. I wish I could transform this suffering into something strong. How about Sarah? I inquired. Is there anything we can do to stop her involvement? Jessica gave a slow nod. Even though dealing with family members is more difficult, there are still options available to us. We can at least make sure that any assets that the family may have in common are safeguarded. That afternoon, as I walked out of Jessica's office, my head was buzzing with potential solutions. I had a sense of direction and purpose for the first time since I found out about the affair. I was no longer only a victim. I was a lady with a purpose. I took a seat at my computer that evening and began planning. I started by making a list of all the things I wanted to do. I wanted to protect my financial future, reveal Tom's unethical behavior at work, make sure Sarah was held accountable for her activities, and demonstrate to my parents that I wouldn't be coerced or held responsible. I felt an increasing sensation of empowerment as I typed. I had indeed been harmed. I had indeed been deceived. However, I refused to let that define who I was. Rather, I was going to turn this suffering into motivation to start a new phase of my life. I was aware that the path ahead would not be simple. There would be more conflicts and challenging discussions. It's possible that my family won't comprehend or agree with my choices. But I felt strong for the first time in weeks. I was resolved. I made the decision to return to work tomorrow. I would take a proud stance and begin implementing my goals. Sarah and Tom believed they could treat me badly and yet get away with it. My parents believed they could use guilt to get me to ignore everything. They were all going to find out how mistaken they were. I noticed myself in the mirror as I shut down my laptop and prepared for bed. The devastated, deceived victim I had been for the previous 2 weeks was not the lady staring back at me. She was prepared to face any obstacles because she was a fighter. I said in a whisper to my reflection, "Watch out, world. I'm returning stronger than before." For the first time since this whole experience started, I felt completely at peace as I turned off the light and went to bed. I was eager to begin the first day of my new life, which was tomorrow. I'm going to talk to you now, Reddit. Have any of you had a similar situation? How did you respond to it? And how do you feel about my revenge plan? Is it excessive, or is my desire to hold them all accountable for their actions justified? As I start my new path, I would value any guidance or assistance you might provide. Update 1. 2 weeks have passed since my last post, and I would like to express my gratitude to everyone for their guidance and encouragement. Your remarks have been a lifesaver for me at this trying time. I'll give you an update because a lot has happened. The revenge strategy comes first. After speaking with my attorney, Jessica, I made the decision to act in several ways. First, we filed a formal complaint about Tom's inappropriate connection with me and his following romance with my sister with his human resources department. Considering that we are in the same industry, it was a risky move, but I couldn't allow him to get away with it. The reaction was prompt. While an inquiry was conducted, Tom was put on administrative leave. I'll admit that I felt a little satisfied as I watched him being led from the premises with a box of personal belongings. However, it didn't last long. I was struck hard by the fact that my private life was now being used as fodder for office rumors. My personal role at work has grown more complex. Even though my supervisors have been encouraging, I can sense the sidelong stares and whispered discussions that end when I walk into a room. It's obvious that people are curious about my level of knowledge, my anticipated length of stay, and my stability in managing large accounts. In an effort to demonstrate that my personal drama won't impact my professional performance, I've poured myself into my work. Things have gotten worse on the family front. Do you recall how my parents pushed for a family gathering to work things out? It was a catastrophe, but it did happen. A quiet room in a downtown restaurant served as our neutral meeting spot. My blood pressure shot up the moment I went in and saw Sarah sitting there, looking anxious yet somehow defiant. Naturally, my parents were also present, serving as mediators. My father started by saying, "Girls, we're here to talk this out like adults. Until our family decides how to proceed, nobody is going anywhere." I couldn't contain my laughter. "Go ahead? Are you serious? There is no way to move past this." Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke. "I am aware that what I did was improper. I sincerely apologize. However, shouldn't we at least attempt to resolve this?" With a mixture of anger and incredulity, I turned to face her. "Resolve this? You spent 6 months having sex with my partner. Day after day, you deceived me. What do you want to do now? Pretend it never occurred and give it a hug." "She's not saying that," my mother interrupted. "As a family, we simply want to figure out how to get better. You two have always had a tight relationship." I corrected her, saying, "We're close. Tense in the past. And who is to blame for that?" From there, the discussion took a different turn. My parents begged, Sarah wept, and I felt numb. It was obvious that they all expected me to put family unity ahead of my personal sentiments and to finally forgive and move on. I had had enough guilt-tripping and pointless discussions after an hour. With a loud scrape of my chair against the floor, I got up. "This is useless," I remarked. "It appears that you have all determined how this should proceed without taking my feelings into account. Well, I'm not complying. I'm finished." I heard my mother calling after me as I left, but I chose not to turn around. I disabled their social media accounts and phone numbers that evening. Although it was a bold step, I needed time to recover from their unrelenting pressure. Things took an intriguing turn on the Tom front. He contacted me a few days after he was placed on leave, asking me to withdraw my complaint to HR rather than offering an apology or pleading for my forgiveness. He begged over the phone that this may destroy his career. "Can't we deal with this in private?" His boldness astounded me. "Take this in private? Similar to how you and Sarah had your 6-month clandestine affair." He was bold enough to sound angry. "That isn't the same. We're talking about my livelihood here." I retorted icily, "You ought to have considered that before you chose to sleep with my sister. Tom, actions have repercussions. You need to face yours now." I experienced a range of feelings once I hung up. Hearing the desperation in his voice and knowing that he was finally being held accountable for his acts made me feel a certain amount of satisfaction. However, I was also worn out from the drama and the continual reminders of their treachery. At that point, I decided. I required a change, a new beginning. I started researching employment prospects in other cities. The idea of uprooting my life was both thrilling and horrifying, but the more I considered it, the more it seemed right. With a Seattle boutique agency, I discovered a good lead. Following a round of interviews, they offered me an offer after being impressed by my experience and portfolio. Although it was a lateral transfer in terms of employment, the opportunity to reinvent myself and the change of environment were invaluable. My supervisor was sympathetic but obviously unhappy when I gave notice at work. He questioned, "Are you certain about this? Here, you've established a solid career. Don't allow personal problems to pull you away." I was grateful for his care, but I had already made up my mind. "I'm positive," I assured him. "I need to start over on both a personal and professional level." I was shocked by how many coworkers contacted me to offer their support when word circulated about my upcoming leave. Many of them talked about how they overcame personal obstacles and changed their identities in the middle of their careers. Their words of support made me more determined. I've been going to a therapist to help me process everything in the middle of this. I have benefited greatly from Dr. Larson's 58 degrees Fahrenheit assistance in processing my anguish and anger. She has assisted me in seeing that, although my emotions are true, I must not allow them to control me. During one session, she informed me that while seeking revenge may feel good at the time, it won't make your grief go away. Living a good life and going on is the best form of retaliation. I'm making an effort to heed her advice and concentrate on creating my new life rather than destroying my previous one. It's not always simple, and sometimes I still feel like my wrath will get the better of me. But I'm getting better. As I get ready to relocate to Seattle and pack up my apartment, I'm thinking about how much has changed in only a few short weeks. My sister, my partner, and, in a sense, my parents have all passed away. However, I've also developed a new feeling of self, a resolve I was unaware I had. I am aware that the path ahead will not be simple. It's intimidating to start anew in a new city and start my life over from scratch. But I'm looking forward to the future for the first time in a long time. I'm interested to see who I'll develop into once I'm not burdened by expectations from my family or betrayal. I hear those who told me to forgive, move on, and take the high road. I no longer seek retribution for its own sake. Yes, I'm working for justice, but more than that, I'm working for my own happiness and mental health. So, Reddit, that's the current situation. I'm going to start a new chapter in my life, putting the hurt and treachery behind me. Although I'm anxious, thrilled, and a bit afraid, I'm primarily proud of myself for taking charge of my life. I appreciate all of your help and guidance. You have no idea how much it has meant. After I'm settled in Seattle, I'll provide another update. Good luck to me. Update 2. 3 months have passed since my last post, and I'm writing this from my new Seattle apartment with a view of Puget Sound. Every day, the view reminds me of my progress. It's exciting and scary to move to a new city in your late 40s. Although everything is new, there is a certain liberation that comes with not knowing. Nobody here is aware of my past, my suffering, or my guilt. Whoever I want to be, I can be. In the best way conceivable, my new position at the boutique agency has been demanding. I'm taking on multiple roles because the team is smaller. I've had to learn new talents and step outside of my comfort zone as a result. I am gradually forming new friendships. It's a start, even though it's not as good as the close relationships I had in New York. Let's move on to the fallout from my revenge plan. I place that in quotes because, in retrospect, it was more about justice and taking back control of my life than it was about getting even. In the end, Tom lost his job due to professional misconduct. A history of inappropriate behavior with other coworkers was also discovered during the HR probe. My old employer called me and thanked me for coming forward and apologized for not detecting Tom's actions sooner. The repercussions for Sarah have been less professional and more personal. As word of her affair spread, she lost acquaintances, and our parents finally seemed to understand the seriousness of what she had done. She wrote me a tearful letter last week, filled with explanations and apologies. She talked about how she had always felt like she was living in my shadow and of her own fears. The letter concluded with an appeal for pardon. For the first time, I sensed a tiny fracture in the wall of wrath I had constructed, but I'm still not there, not even close. I haven't replied yet, and I may not do so. Additionally, my parents have begun contacting me more often. Instead of advocating for reconciliation, they have been helping me adjust to my new life. In order to send a housewarming present, my mom even inquired for my address. My own self-change has been the most notable. Peace has slowly taken the place of the rage that previously overwhelmed me. Even though I still get angry occasionally, they are become less frequent and less severe. This approach has been greatly aided by my therapist, Dr. Larson. Forgiveness is something we've been working on, not for Tom or Sarah, but for me. She has aided me in seeing that forgiving someone does not include accepting their actions or allowing them to return to my life. It entails letting go of the grip that rage has on me. I've been concentrating on personal development and self-care. I've started taking photography classes, joined a reading group, and started doing yoga and meditation. I went on my first date since the whole situation last weekend. It wasn't a life-altering experience, but it was nice to meet someone new. His name is Mark, 52 million. In terms of my career, I'm succeeding in unexpected ways. My enthusiasm for advertising has been rekindled by the new beginning. I presented a campaign that challenged convention last week. We got the account because the client thought it was fantastic. It served as a potent reminder of my value on both a personal and professional level. There have also been difficulties. There are days when loneliness is too much to bear. I long for the comforts of my former existence. Sometimes I wonder why I choose to move away from everything. But then I think back to where I was only a few months ago. Angry, damaged, and caught in a vicious cycle of betrayal and suffering. I know I made the right decision when I consider how far I've come. I want those of you experiencing similar difficulties to know that there is hope. You'll make it through this. You'll discover a strength you never knew you had, and you'll emerge from the experience stronger and wiser, if not unscathed. I have a long way to go. I'm still recovering, learning, and developing. But I'm looking forward to the future for the first time in a long time. What occurred to me no longer defines me. Instead, what I decide to do next does. Reddit, I appreciate you joining me on this adventure. Some of my darkest moments have been illuminated by your encouragement. Although I have no idea what the future will bring, I am certain that I am prepared to meet it head on. When there are noteworthy developments, I'll provide another update. I'll stay here in Seattle until then, appreciating fresh starts and second chances as I watch the sunset over the Sound. Update 3, the adage, revenge is a dish best served cold, has never felt more fitting as it does now, 6 months after my last update. I've been quite busy, and now my well-planned outcomes are finally materializing. Let's start by discussing Tom. Do you recall his dismissal from our previous employer? But that was only the start. I've been methodically damaging his industry-wide professional reputation. How? Thanks to former coworkers who owed me favors, I was able to produce an anonymous blog post that detailed his misbehavior and included censored evidence from our HR department. In the world of advertising, the blog gained a lot of popularity, but I continued. Posing as a headhunter, I created a phony LinkedIn profile and contacted Tom, promising him interviews at prominent agencies. Naturally, my pals who are actors staged these interviews. Tom would arrive, wait for hours, and then be informed that the interview was not planned. This occurred 5 times before he realized what was going on. Last week was the coup de grace. Using some cunning, I managed to get Tom invited to participate in a large advertising conference. This, he believed, was his opportunity to turn his life around. He was unaware that I had positioned multiple persons in the crowd. They questioned him sharply about his prior misbehavior when it came time for Q&A. After stumbling and perspiring, Tom bounded off the stage. Since the video became public, there's no longer any prospect that he will be able to recover his career. Let's go on to Sarah. With that heartfelt letter, my darling sister believed she might slither her way back into my favor. I chose to let my deeds speak louder than my words rather than answer. I employed an excellent PI to investigate her past, and they found a wealth of information. As it happens, Sarah has a history of taking out loans from our parents and never repaying them. I submitted our parents a thorough report that included dates and amounts for each of these loans. They were, to put it mildly, shocked. However, it wasn't all. Additionally, the PI found proof that Sarah had embezzled money from her job. That little issue was resolved when her company's audit department received an anonymous tip. When I discovered that Sarah had been lying about her educational background, however, it was the cherry on top. Although she stated on her resume that she had completed her degree, she never did. After making a brief phone call to her human resources department, Sarah was declared unemployed and unemployable. Our parents, on the other hand, at last realized the truth. To supposedly clear the air, I called a family gathering. Rather, I showed a PowerPoint that listed all of Sarah's deceptions and manipulations across the years. It was immensely satisfying to see the changes in their expressions from bewilderment to shock to rage. Sarah is now totally cut off from them, both financially and emotionally. This degree of retaliation may seem extreme to you, but I can promise you that it is just. I almost got destroyed by these people. They attempted to gaslight me into forgiveness, abused my confidence, and diminished my sense of value. Forgiveness is not an option. Despite everything, I've been doing well in Seattle. My new position? I currently lead a boutique agency as its CEO. As it turns out, the owner wanted to retire, and I made him an irresistible offer. It was worthwhile even if I had to spend a sizable portion of my savings. Now, I have the authority to ban Tom and Sarah from a whole industry. My personal life has also changed in an intriguing way. Do you recall the architect, Mark? He has his own spiteful streak, it turns out. He offered some inventive ways to make his ex-wife's life miserable when she cheated on him. We are now allies in life and retaliation. Being with someone who sympathizes with my suffering and encourages me to take action is thrilling. In addition, I have established a support group for those who have experienced familial betrayal. I've gained some wonderful allies, and it's been helpful. We encourage one another, exchange tactics, and sometimes even assist one another in plotting retaliation. I adore it. It's like a book club with a twist. Some of you may be wondering if any of this makes me feel bad. The answer is definitely no. I provided Tom and Sarah the opportunity to express genuine regret and make amends. Rather, they attempted to control me and force me to forgive before I was ready. They are now realizing that their acts have repercussions. I want to respond to those of you who suggested that I be the greater person or take the high road. Sometimes it's overrated. Fire must sometimes be put out with fire. I'm not saying that everyone should follow this route, but for me, it was essential. This retaliation has been empowering, therapeutic, and well worth the effort. I feel a sense of calm that I haven't experienced in years as I sit in my corner office with a view of the Seattle skyline. The rage that used to devour me has given way to contentment. It feels amazing to be in charge of my story now. Remind yourself that you don't have to be a victim if you find yourself in a similar circumstance. You don't know how powerful you are. Don't be scared to use it, but use it carefully. My last update will be this one. I'm ending this chapter of my life by making sure that the people who harmed me never forget what they did, not by forgiving and moving on. I appreciate everyone who has followed my journey. Cheers to fresh starts, delicious retaliation, and the strength that comes from taking charge of your own destiny. Be careful, world. Not only am I back, but I'm returning with a bang. My parents kicked me out because of my sister. 6 years later, they're asking for help to support her and her 4 young children. I, 32F, am currently in charge of significant commercial development projects around New England as a successful architect at a prominent Boston firm. Nathan, a 34-year-old man who works as a project manager in sustainable development, is my fiancé. Our wedding is scheduled for the following year. On the surface, my life appears to be ideal. I have rewarding work, a wonderful relationship, and a lovely craftsman-style home that I designed extensive modifications for. However, I'm questioning everything because of a complex family situation that recently reached a breaking point. I must go into great depth about my family history in order for you to comprehend the current circumstance. I was raised in a Connecticut suburb in an upper-middle-class household. My mother, Phoebe, 56F, taught high school at a private school until she left 6 years ago, and my father, Richard, 58M, works as a corporate lawyer at a reputable business. Ashley, my younger sister, who is 30 degrees Fahrenheit, has always been the star of our family. Favoritism was evident from my earliest recollections, even if my parents would strongly dispute it if questioned. I received consecutive A's on my report card when I was 8 and Ashley was 6, and I was simply informed, "That's expected of you?" While Ashley received B's and was commended and brought out for ice cream because she was trying her best. Throughout our childhood, this trend persisted. Ashley's meager efforts were widely praised, while my accomplishments were anticipated and frequently disregarded. When I was 15, I recall one specific occurrence. I had been working on my design project for months, frequently staying up until 2 in the morning, in preparation for a national high school architectural competition. I received a minor scholarship as a result of placing second nationally. Ashley had an ordinary soccer match that day, so my parents didn't even make it to the award ceremony. "That's nice," they replied, barely taking their eyes off the TV as I brought my award home, before turning back to Ashley's dramatic account of how she nearly scored a goal. Even though my parents were clearly biased, I did well in school and in my personal life. I led multiple community service projects, kept a 4.0 GPA, and served as president of the student body. In the meantime, as Ashley approached adolescence, her actions became more alarming. When she began to slip out when I was 14, my parents told me to keep a better eye on her. She was caught stealing high-end makeup when she was 15, and they accused me of not providing her my allowance money even though she clearly needed it. The assumption that I should put Ashley's needs and interests ahead of my own was the most annoying aspect, not only the partiality. My part-time job at a local design firm, where I made coffee and filed papers, allowed me to save up $3,000 when I was 16. I intended to use it for a Columbia University summer architecture course. My parents, however, borrowed my cash to assist cover the repairs after Ashley, who wasn't supposed to be driving, smashed her boyfriend's car. They never fulfilled their commitment to reimburse me. I lost the chance to improve my college applications and the summer program opportunity. I was able to gain admission to a prominent architectural program in spite of these obstacles. In order to save money, my parents agreed to let me live at home while I was in college and to assist with my tuition. They wanted me around to assist handle Ashley, who was now in high school and becoming more disobedient by the day, so this wasn't totally selfless. I recall making several attempts to speak with Ashley about her actions. One exchange is particularly memorable. 3 months or so passed before everything collapsed. At 3 in the morning on a school night, I discovered her slinking back into the house. Assisting Ashley to climb through the window, I whispered, "Ashley, you need to be more careful. You're in your senior year, and colleges look at more than just grades." She retorted, "Stop trying to be mom. Just because your life is boring and all about buildings doesn't mean mine has to be." In hindsight, I ought to have anticipated this. Ashley spent a lot of time with Tyler, her 17-year-old ex-boyfriend, who was known for being trouble. My parents viewed everyone I dated with extreme mistrust, yet they were surprisingly lenient about their relationship. My mother accused me of being envious of Ashley's vibrant social life when I attempted to voice my concerns about Tyler. 6 years ago, everything drastically altered. One day, Ashley, a senior in high school at the time, came home and declared she was expecting a child. The father was Tyler. I can still clearly recall that night. Ashley sitting on the couch with a look of fear and defiance on her face, my father pacing the living room, and my mother sobbing uncontrollably. In the confusion that ensued, my parents somehow twisted the facts to accuse me of failing to keep a closer eye on her. My mother arrived in my room the following day with news that would forever alter my course in life. Without even looking at him, she stated, "You have to move out by the end of the week." I couldn't understand. What? Why? With Tyler moving in and a baby on the way, the house isn't large enough for all of us. Ashley needs your space. One approach to support your sister at this trying period would be to move out. I made an effort to reason with her. During my 3rd year of college, I worked part-time at a nearby architecture business and maintained a 3.9 GPA. She insisted on finding me a cheap apartment close to university, even though I just requested for a few months. The worst thing was when my father summoned me to his home office the next day. He delivered another hit while seated behind his enormous oak desk, which he had always used to frighten clients. "We won't be able to continue paying your tuition," he stated in a cold, clinical tone. "That money is necessary for Ashley and the child. You'll figure something out since you're intelligent." I stood there looking at the man who had always emphasized the value of education and accountability, suddenly severing his daughter's ties after she had done everything correctly. The irony hurt. I packed my things that evening. My father stopped me in the driveway as I was packing the final box into my car. I briefly believed that he might reconsider. Rather, he gave me a piece of paper with a list of local women's shelters on it. He said, "Just in case," and went back inside. The next phase of my life was the darkest. For 4 months, I lived in my car and, for safety, parked every night in a different Walmart lot. In the architecture firm where I worked part-time, I would change in public toilets, take a shower in the campus gym, and keep my business attire in my locker. I took a second job working as a late-night barista, frequently juggling multiple jobs while attending classes. I asked a few family members for assistance, but they all turned me down. My 53-year-old Aunt Susan, who had always expressed her pride in my accomplishments, informed me that she didn't want to become embroiled in family strife. According to my grandparents, they were too old to handle the matter. I occasionally went days without eating a decent meal, barely making it on protein bars and coffee. I frequently slept off at my desk while working on my homework in the college library, which was open 24 hours a day. I kept my GPA the same in spite of everything. My escape was architecture. I put all of my suffering and willpower into my designs. My parents never once called to see whether I was still alive during this time. Ashley didn't either. After learning that she had given birth to a boy, I made one phone call, but it was awkward and short. After that, there was no communication for 6 years. I had to start over in my life throughout those 6 years. Despite working 60-hour weeks and living in my car and then a small room in a dubious area of town, I finished with honors. A famous Boston business was interested in my final thesis project, which was a design for a sustainable community center with transitional housing that received multiple prizes. Living in a small studio apartment and trying to save as much money as I could, I began my career as an entry-level architect. Every advancement was a triumph over my past. I was managing my own projects for 4 years. My area of expertise was sustainable commercial development, and I gained recognition for my creative ideas that put the needs of people and the environment first. 3 years ago, Nathan and I met at a seminar on sustainable development. During the Q&A portion of his presentation on green construction projects, I disputed one of his claims. He invited me to continue the conversation over coffee rather than becoming defensive. Dinner evolved from that coffee into the most wholesome and encouraging relationship I've ever experienced. Nathan is well aware of my background. He was present when I purchased my first home after getting expelled. When I signed the paperwork and broke down because I was so overcome by the fact that I finally had a place where no one could make me leave, he held me. He supported my idea to refurbish it and make it an environment that reflected all of my accomplishments over the years. Through mutual contacts, I occasionally learned tidbits about Ashley's life. Shortly after the birth of their baby, she wed Tyler, but the two of them split up after 6 months. By that time, she was expecting her second kid, but the father had entirely vanished after learning of the pregnancy. She had another kid with Marcus, the man she married 2 years later, but their marriage failed when she had an affair. She is now pregnant once more and doesn't seem to know who the father is. I got a call yesterday from an unidentified number right before bed. After 6 years of stillness, my mother called. She initially pretended nothing had happened, inquiring about my life and showing interest in my accomplishments. I briefly felt like that young child again, excited to tell my mother about my achievements. I even began to tell her about my recent promotion to senior architect and my engagement. Then she revealed the true reason she had called. In order to assist Ashley and her kids, my parents want me to return to Connecticut. They say they're too old to care for 4 small children, and my father will shortly be retiring. They even had the gall to claim that, as the successful sister, it is my duty to support the family. My mother said, "You've always been the responsible one," with that cunning tone I so vividly remembered in her voice. Now more than ever, Ashley needs her big sister. Family must remain united. A chilly chuckle erupted within me. Family have to stick together? I said it again. When I was sleeping in my car, where was this family? When I was barely eating and working 2 jobs? When there was nobody for me to turn to? I went on despite my mother's attempt to stop me. "You absolutely abandoned me, kicked me out, and stopped paying for my schooling in order to help Ashley. You expect me to sacrifice my life, career, and relationship in order to clean up your mess once more now that she has continued to make bad decisions and you're sick of dealing with the fallout?" I hung up after telling her that I would never again risk my life for Ashley. Since then, family members who turned down my request for assistance 6 years ago have been bombarding my phone with messages accusing me of being callous and asserting that family helps family. Nathan completely agrees with my decision to uphold my boundaries, but other people argue that since they are still family and retaliation won't mend old hurts, I should at least have a meeting with them. But this doesn't seem like vindictiveness to me. I saw it as defending the life I created on my own, after being deserted by those who were meant to keep me safe. Update 1. First of all, I want to thank everyone for their tremendous support and wisdom. My phone has been buzzing nonstop with messages from extended family members for the past 48 hours, which has been very taxing. The circumstances have changed in unexpected ways. My mother wrote me a long email detailing Ashley's children's daily problems, along with comprehensive pictures of my nieces and nephews. The oldest, who is currently in kindergarten, is exhibiting early behavioral problems. The second child's health issues necessitate regular medical care. Another is on the way, while the third is still a toddler. A communication from an old family friend who teaches at Ashley's old high school was what really got to me. She informed me that in order to pay for Ashley's costs and medical bills, my parents have been taking out loans. My father has delayed his retirement indefinitely, and they have already remortgaged their home. Ashley personally sent a direct message, which was the most unexpected development. She reached out for the first time in 6 years, not to apologize but to let her big sister know that she had changed and needed her. She talked about acknowledging her past sins and is attending therapy. Although I've seen this pattern before, I still have a part of me that wants to believe her. In order to keep both physical and emotional distance from the family, my fiancé Nathan proposed a compromise, providing financial support for the kids' schooling through a trust fund. It's an intriguing idea that would enable me to assist the defenseless kids without being embroiled in the family strife. All of this is still registering in my mind. Seeing those pictures of the children, who are innocent in all of this, has made me feel conflicted, even though my logical side knows I owe them nothing. When I make a choice about Nathan's suggestion, I'll provide another update. I need some time right now to process everything without having to deal with family pressure all the time. Update 2. Over the last 24 hours, everything has drastically changed. My mother called me in an emergency last night. Ashley had been involved in a severe vehicle accident. Another automobile ran a red light and collided with her car while she was driving alone. The situation was dire because she was pregnant. I got into my car and drove to Connecticut for 4 hours without giving it any thought. It felt unreal to enter that hospital. As he paced the corridor in his faded suit, my father appeared to be much older than his years. When she saw me, my mother lost it all. I hadn't actually seen them in person for 6 years. Although Ashley's injuries were not life-threatening because of the airbags, the doctors added, they had to perform an emergency C-section in order to save the baby. With a questionable prognosis, the premature baby is currently in the NICU. My biggest surprise was going back to the house I grew up in. I grudgingly complied with my parents' request that I remain rather than book a hotel. Entering my former room felt like entering a time portal. My old desk was still in its original condition, my architecture designs were still attached to the walls, and even my high school trophies were still neatly arranged. Everything was just as I had left it 6 years prior. Then it dawned on me that they hadn't actually converted my room into an area for Ashley. The whole needing the room pretext had been nothing more than a pretext. Another unanticipated emotional moment was meeting my nieces and nephews. I was astonished to hear Charlie, 6 million, The oldest, say, Aunt Rebecca, I know you from the pictures. My parents had apparently informed them about their aunt, who constructs stunning structures, in spite of everything. After I assisted them in building a block tower, the smaller ones, Ava, 4F, and Lucas, 2M, who had been timid at first, quickly warmed up. After 3 days here, I'm learning new things that make my emotions even more complicated. I discovered a stack of unsent letters from my father while searching through some old documents for Ashley's insurance information. They were letters of apologies that he never mailed, all addressed to me and dated throughout the previous 6 years. Tears appeared to have soiled several of them. Yesterday, Nathan flew in to help me get through this. I became aware of how much these children deserve to be free from the chaos they were born into as I watched him engage with my nieces and nephew, using play to teach them basic engineering concepts. Ashley is still in and out of consciousness, but she is stable presently. The baby's condition is still dire. Although I've taken an emergency leave of absence, I have some important project deadlines to attend to in Boston next week. How I feel about things is still a mystery to me. My fury is still there, but it's mixed up with other feelings I can't quite put my finger on. The youngsters who somehow know about me, the preserved chamber, and the unsent letters are all making me rethink how I perceive the previous 6 years. I have to return to the hospital right now to get an update on the baby's health. Next week, when I return to Boston, I will write more. I'm just attempting to live day by day for the time being. Update 3. After spending another week in Connecticut, this time with Nathan, I just got back to Boston. It was a complex experience. Ashley asked me to invite him expressly because she wanted to meet the person who makes her sister happy. The dynamics were revealing and unpleasant. I made a startling discovery while we were there. I discovered years' worth of Ashley's treatment records while assisting my mother with organizing some medical paperwork. My parents never disclosed to me that she had been dealing with bipolar disorder since she was in her teens. Manic episodes occurred at the same time as the numerous pregnancies and relationship problems. This information adds another level of complexity to the process, but it does not justify the way they treated me. The most pivotal event occurred when I spoke with Ashley privately in her hospital room. She was more lucid than I had seen her in years, most likely as a result of taking her medications as prescribed following the accident. She acknowledged that, even in high school, she had envied my success and security. "You made everything look so easy," she stated. And I felt like the family disappointment in comparison. Neither of us missed the irony. Nathan's presence proved to be quite important. I was too deeply invested to notice what he saw. One evening at supper, he pointed out that my father was unable to look me in the eye, displaying signals of intense embarrassment instead of the apathy I had always imagined. Additionally, he saw my mother's tense tendency to begin statements and then stop them quickly, seemingly out of fear of saying the wrong thing. The children now play a big role in my emotional equation. Charlie, 6 million, my oldest nephew, showed me his architectural drawings, which were sloppy but sincere attempts to replicate images of my work that my parents must have shown him. When the younger ones, Ava, 4F, and Lucas, 2M, begin referring to Nathan as uncle, it has a deeper impact on him than he anticipated. The infant will need to remain in the NICU for at least another month, although her condition has stabilized. My parents have been sleeping in the waiting area on shifts, refusing to leave their grandchildren alone, according to a nurse who spoke to us during one of our hospital stays. They appear emotionally and physically worn out. I've made some sensible choices. A family therapist with expertise in intergenerational trauma is what I'm setting up. I've also discussed working remotely for a few days every month with my company. I haven't changed my mind about returning to Connecticut though. I now live and work in Boston. On the way back to Boston, Nathan and I had a lengthy conversation. His statement, "Sometimes the hardest part of healing isn't forgiving others. It's forgiving yourself for still caring," really resonated with me. I've been feeling bad about not being able to control my rage in its purest, protective form, so this really spoke to me. I have a crucial client meeting tomorrow, so I must concentrate. Strangely, at the moment, routine work duties feel both anchoring and inconsequential. After our first family therapy appointment, which is set for next week, I'll provide another update. Update 4. Something important happened during my parents' trip to Boston last weekend, so I had to write this update. You read correctly. They traveled to Boston ostensibly to talk about important issues pertaining to the family situation. I initially consented to meet them in a neutral setting, a peaceful cafe close to the public garden. But they persisted in touring my residence because they claimed to be interested in learning more about my life. I reluctantly consented after speaking with Nathan and establishing explicit guidelines on the length of their stay. It was surprising how they responded to my house. Normally stoic, my father broke down when he saw my architecture awards in my home office. However, their true purpose caught me completely off guard. They produced paperwork that demonstrated they had been covertly putting money aside for me ever since they expelled me. I've never witnessed my father sobbing so much in my life. He clarified that for 6 years, they had established a different savings account and contributed the amount equal to my college tuition each month. It has grown to a significant amount with interest. Their justification? They intended to leave it in their will because they were too embarrassed to deal with me personally. A fierce confrontation resulted from this revelation. I let out years' worth of suppressed rage because I could no longer contain it. "Do you think money can fix what you did?" I yelled. "I lived in my vehicle. I didn't eat. I tried to keep up my grades by working till I was worn out." My father then made a statement that really stopped me cold. "We don't expect forgiveness," he stated. "We just want you to know that your suffering has haunted us every single day." He then showed me his diary, which detailed all of my accomplishments that he had followed over the years via social media and professional networks. He mentioned my advancements, my first significant project, and even the Sustainable Design Prize I received the previous year. After sobbing quietly, my mother finally opened out about Ashley's past mental health issues. Evidently, they had observed similar behavioral tendencies in Ashley's early years but disregarded the warning signs in favor of managing me as the stable child. She acknowledged that their parenting style had been completely incorrect. When they mentioned their most recent worries, the topic of conversation changed. They disclosed that Marcus, Ashley's ex-husband, is attempting to obtain full custody of their child by using the accident and Ashley's history of mental illness. Just as she is beginning to stabilize with her new medicine regimen, they are concerned that this could lead to another breakdown. This is when the situation becomes complex. I'm no longer being asked to relocate back. Rather, they are asking me to assist them in locating a reputable mental health center in Boston for Ashley and the child after she is discharged from the NICU. In order to assist with the other children while Ashley receives the care she needs, they wish to sell their Connecticut home and relocate closer. Nathan, who remained close by to provide assistance if necessary, subsequently made a significant observation. They're finally acknowledging their mistakes and trying to find actual solutions instead of just dumping responsibilities on you. I'm still taking it all in. Although the money they save doesn't change the past, their persistent covert efforts at making amends reveal a level of regret I hadn't previously thought of. My father's journal seems like a heartbreaking reminder of what might have been, a father who was proud of his daughter's accomplishments but was too embarrassed to say so out loud. To learn more about Ashley's custody dispute and what part, if any, I should play in it, I'm meeting with a family law lawyer tomorrow. Additionally, I'm looking into psychiatric hospitals that focus in postpartum mental health treatment. Regarding my assistance with Ashley's treatment plans, I have not responded to them. Although I have a strong desire to uphold rigid limits, I also acknowledge that this could be an opportunity for genuine, structural change in our family's dynamic. This time, with the right boundaries and expert assistance, things could be different. Once I've decided how I want to participate in these new developments, I'll provide another update. Update 5. I've made some decisions regarding my relationship with my family going forward after giving it a lot of thought and attending multiple family therapy sessions. Initially, in response to my parents' inquiry concerning Ashley's care, I assisted them in locating a respectable mental health and postpartum care center in Boston. I did, however, clarify that my participation would be strictly limited and professional. Although I will not be personally involved in Ashley's daily care, I was able to connect them with the resources they needed through my professional network. My parents' savings account has been transformed into a trust fund, of which I am the trustee, for Ashley's children's education. This arrangement guarantees that the funds will be utilized suitably while upholding professional boundaries. Nathan used his financial planning and contacts to assist put things up. I never imagined how my relationship with my family would change over time. I've developed a methodical approach to keeping in touch that safeguards my personal well-being, even if I won't be returning to Connecticut or taking on any caregiving duties. We've decided to continue family therapy sessions and have frequent video chats with the kids, with Ashley being contacted directly only in case of emergencies. Even though my mother still calls a lot, I've seen a big shift in the way she handles things. She no longer makes demands or guilt trips before providing family information, and she respects my limits when I tell her that I'm too busy to talk. My father made the most unexpected revelation. In addition to sending me a formal written apology outlining particular occasions in which he failed me as a father, he began visiting his own therapist. Instead of the cliched, "I'm sorry for everything," I had anticipated, I received a considerate acknowledgement of particular negative behaviors and how they affected my life. After being admitted to the treatment center, Ashley is beginning to show recovery. At last, the infant is well and no longer in the NICU. I've made arrangements for a child psychologist to work with her older children to help them deal with these changes while I keep an emotional distance. I've decided not to include my family too much in our wedding arrangements, which Nathan and I are moving forward with. Although they will be invited as guests, friends who helped me through my darkest moments will play the customary family roles in the wedding. I am content with my choices as I look to the future. It's a carefully planned relationship that safeguards my mental health while recognizing the intricacy of familial ties, even though it's not the total reunion some might expect for. I've discovered that taking care of family members doesn't have to mean compromising my own health or giving into toxic relationships. There isn't a tidy, happy ending to my story where everything is forgiven and forgotten. Rather, it ends realistically, with relationships being reframed on better terms, professional assistance being sought, and boundaries being upheld. That's the best we can do at times, and that's acceptable. My last update will be this one. We are grateful to everyone who helped and counseled us along the way. I was able to strike a balance between self-preservation and compassion because of your ideas. Dad favored my sister but was rejected. I chose my brother to walk me down the aisle and witnessed karma hit him hard. Dad wanted to take my sister down the aisle first, but she chose our stepdad, so he declined to walk me down the aisle. Dad is crying now and pleading with me to let him. Although I've never been a particularly vindictive person, I do enjoy it when karma is presented in a palpable manner, which is what has occurred. I don't care if that makes me a bad person or a lousy daughter. I couldn't be happier or more arrogant about the whole thing. After years and years of pain and emotional abuse, I am overjoyed to have finally seen justice. My father has made me feel awful as I've grown up. He suddenly remembers this daughter of his that he never really liked in the first place, now that he has no one else to rely on. Out of my 3 siblings, I, F31, am the middle one. Sarah, F29, is my younger sister, and Finley, Finn, M37, is my older brother. We were a happy family for the majority of my upbringing. At least my mom, F59, did her best to be an equal parent, even though my parents had their preferences. My father, M65, is not in the same boat. Favoritism was clearly visible in his actions. His favorite person was Sarah, and since Finn was the son, he naturally felt a connection with him and they could bond over man things. I was, of course, left out of this dynamic. It began at a very young age. I've always had the impression that my father didn't think highly of me. I made a few attempts to express it, maybe by throwing fits because I was a challenging kid overall, but nothing I ever did got his attention. As I grew older, I came to terms with it. I believe Mom tried to make up for his partiality after noticing it. Because I would have remained invisible my entire life if it had been up to my father, I have always adored her for seeing me. Mom did her best to be an equitable parent, but as I mentioned, she was not flawless. She treated us the same and loved us equally. I believe Finn noticed that she made an effort to keep me from feeling excluded. He attempted to fill in after noticing my neglect and my tendency to be distant. When Finn was learning how to change automobile tires, he would ask Dad if I could come along. When Dad taught him how to drive, he made sure I was present. Dad didn't involve me in the chats, so I know it was him. I didn't experience abuse or anything similar. We received similar gifts if they gave them to us. For example, I received as many new outfits as either Sarah or Finn. However, Dad never provided me with any emotional support. Mom and Finn attempted to fill that void in my life for all that time. Sarah, on the other hand, simply enjoyed playing the role of the young princess. She was a snobby child, and her attitude caused her school to raise various concerns. In some way, all of those worries were ignored. She developed into a very demanding and conceited young lady. I am not really close to her as a result. I'm really close to Finn, and he simply can't bear Sarah. Dad is the only one who does not find her behavior problematic. Mom barely puts up with her either. This is the current situation. Mom and Dad split about a decade ago. We have all been kept in the dark about the true reason for the friendly breakup. We all know that Mom and Dad's claim that they are no longer compatible is untrue. Something else is the true cause. Since none of them began dating someone new for a long period after the divorce, I am very sure it wasn't infidelity. We all still don't know the truth, and Mom and Dad have always wanted to keep it that way. There was no custody issue to deal with because we were all adults at the time. Since then, they've generally gotten along well. Since, let's face it, there's no love lost there, I have personally opted to avoid seeing Dad as much as possible. I suppose it works for both of us because he hasn't voiced any complaints about my absence. When I have free time, I usually visit Mom's house, although Finn and Sarah split their time equally between the 2 locations. We never go with Sarah unless it's for Christmas, but Finn and I occasionally plan our trips to Mom's house. Finn simply cannot tolerate her. When viewed from the outside, we appear to be rather normal and functional. But for once, I am glad that things have taken a turn for the worse. Mom began dating Arthur, M60, 5 years ago. They clicked right away after meeting at a yoga retreat. My time with Arthur is enjoyable, and he is a cool guy. He never tries to push limits and is kind to Finn and myself. Since nobody has ever mentioned it and I don't see any justification for him to treat Sarah badly, I'm going to presume that everything is well between them. All that matters is that Mom is happy. Even though Dad is very combative with Arthur, they have a friendly relationship. I believe it's because Dad doesn't have a steady partner and his dating life hasn't been very successful. In addition, Mom's life is opulent in comparison to her life with Dad, and Arthur makes a lot more money than Dad does. We are all pleased for Mom, but I believe Dad is really resentful of the whole thing. The fact that we get along well with Arthur is another thing he dislikes. Dad still acts envious despite Finn's attempts to explain that none of us are taking his place and that we are simply acting like responsible adults in this scenario. All of it is very offensive and childish. Fortunately, since I don't see Dad very often, I don't have to deal with a lot of it. The dynamics of the family are as follows at the moment. Understanding the backdrop is crucial to comprehending the events of the past few days. My fiancée, Kieran, M34, proposed to me a few months ago. We've spent a lot of time together. I prefer to stay private, therefore I didn't make the engagement public right away. After choosing the date, Kieran and I informed our families since we wanted to get married as soon as possible and avoid a lengthy engagement period. 1 week from now, the wedding is planned. My family's response when I told them was conflicted. Arthur was pleased, and Finn and Mom were ecstatic. Sarah appeared pretty unhappy, but Dad's response was fairly neutral. All of this took place during a video call, and I could see that she quickly ended the call after forcing a grin. She detests not being the center of attention, so I was expecting some sort of tantrum, but at that moment, I couldn't stand her theatrics. I informed Finn that I wanted him to be the one to escort me down the aisle, not Dad, and I called him separately to gossip. He remained silent for a time and claimed that although he was deeply moved by my request, he believed it was improper to fulfill and that Dad would make a big deal out of it. He claimed that although he would really like to, he was unable to do so since he didn't want to annoy his father. He said something that hurt me. He understood that I needed him to be there with me since he had been my male protector far more than Dad, and I informed him that I had come to him because I had been let down by Dad on multiple occasions. I hate to say it, but I also felt Finn was making sense, so I didn't argue with him about it. It was an emotional conversation. Gently, he assured me that it didn't matter if he escorted me down the aisle. It was crucial that my day be as uneventful as possible so that I could look back on it with joy and no resentment. If he were to assume Dad's position, he claimed, Dad would remain agitated during the ceremony and spoil the day and the memories for me. He was correct. I knew what Finn said would make my day simpler, if not perfect, and Dad was more than capable of pulling off such a ruse. Finn advised me to discuss it with Dad. I stated I would give it some thought and that I was hesitant to have him escort me down the aisle. Fortunately, Sarah and her boyfriend Zach announced their engagement 2 weeks later. After exchanging glances with Kieran, I knew she would try to steal the show at my wedding or do something else, but I couldn't help myself. Finn was also not very pleased. We were both aware of the timing, but we were unable to change it, so we kept quiet. One positive outcome of this is that Sarah's wedding is scheduled for approximately 5 weeks from now, 1 month after mine. The stars didn't align in her favor, so she had to be content to be the second bride in the family, even though she had really wanted to marry before me. I resisted her attempts to guilt me into delaying my wedding, even though she was rather sour about it. She needed to grow up since I wasn't the type to give in to her whims. Thus, things remained unchanged. But it seems that Dad and Sarah agreed that he would accompany her down the aisle before he did the same for me. I'm not really sure how they came up with something that strange. Since I never had much luck with boys in school or college, I suppose they figured I wouldn't get married or would get married later. In any case, once Sarah announced her engagement, I requested Dad to accompany me down the aisle. He sadly informed me that he had promised his baby that he would accompany her first. Years ago, while she was on her deathbed, which never materialized, he said he had made that commitment. Now, he wouldn't be able to lead me down the aisle because he couldn't break his word and break her heart. To be honest, I was thrilled because I didn't want him to accompany me down the aisle in the first place. I was dancing within as I feigned sadness and hurt. I assured him that even if it hurt, it didn't, I would accept his vow to Sarah because I respected it. I called Finn right away and informed him of the situation. He was upset with his father. Finn stated that he would have seized the chance to accompany me down the aisle immediately if he had known Dad would act in this manner. He said that I could choose whatever daughter I wanted to grant this privilege to if Dad could. I was too delighted to care if Finn was upset with Dad. In the end, it had turned out to be just what I had desired, and I am overjoyed. Despite the pressure of wedding planning, everything was going smoothly. Up until yesterday, when unheard of drama entered my life, drama for which I lacked the stamina, everything looked to be in order, despite my jitteriness and nervousness. Sarah told her father last night that he would not be accompanying her to the wedding. She requested Arthur to do it instead. We were all surprised by this. Not only that, she announced it via video call. She could have been more tactful about it, and it was cruel. We were all aware of Dad's excitement for her wedding. Because she and her fiancé wanted to save money for the honeymoon, he had even covered the entire cost. Dad had nearly mentally checked out of my life, and Mom and Dad were busy organizing 2 weddings. Since all of his attention was on Sarah, he had nothing to contribute or recommend and continued to show no interest in anything pertaining to my wedding. Furthermore, he had not made any financial contributions to my wedding. We were paying for it ourselves, Kieran and I. It had gotten to the point where I was depending more on Mom and Arthur's advice than on Dad's. In contrast to Sarah, Arthur was actively involved in my wedding preparations. Because of this, even Arthur appeared surprised by Sarah's request, or rather, her demand, and was unsure of how to react. When Mom finally stated that Arthur would love to do it, he continued to stare at her. I work in corporate, where terrible calls are almost a given, but that had to be one of the worst calls I've ever been on. Dad was crying. He began cursing out Arthur instead of discussing it with Sarah, and then hung up. And that was all. I didn't ask Dad how he was feeling, but I'm sure the others did. I quickly hung up the phone since I had too many other things to think about. Besides, this wasn't my problem. He didn't want to renege on the commitment he had made to Sarah. It was between them if she broke it. I didn't want or intend to step in. They were able to resolve it among themselves. I wasn't interested in becoming involved in trivial family matters at this time. I had no idea that it would soon cause me great annoyance. A few hours after his little princess dealt him a heartbreaking blow, Dad called me last night in tears. On the phone, he was crying and telling me that he would love to walk me down the aisle now and that he was foolish for turning down my offer. I was shocked by what I heard. It was astonishing how entitled they were. Although I was sorry for what had transpired, I gently explained to him that it was between him and Sarah. It had no bearing whatsoever on my wedding plans. I informed him that this had been decided months prior and that Finn was escorting me down the aisle. I also informed him that I was unable to make a last-minute modification. He promised to speak with Finn, saying that I didn't need to be concerned about Finn's disagreement because Finn was merely a placeholder for him. I explained to him that I didn't want to hurt Finn, not that he agreed. Dad didn't need to know that I didn't want him to be my father in the first place. I informed Dad that no swap was taking place, despite his insistence that he speak with Finn and make amends. The final step was for Finn to lead me down the aisle. He believed I was resisting because Finn wouldn't resign, and he was living in total denial. He was sure he could persuade Finn not to do it. After hanging up, I called Finn right away to let him know what was happening. It would be an understatement to say that Finn was furious. I informed him that I had always wanted him to be the one to reveal my identity when he asked what I wanted. Only at his encouragement did I ask Dad in the first place, and he was the first person I had asked. I replied in the affirmative when Finn asked if I was certain I wanted him to lead me down the aisle. Then he assured me that if Dad phoned him, he would correct him and that I shouldn't worry about anything. Since his favorite had sent him out, I told Finn that I didn't want any drama at the wedding and that Dad needed to realize that he couldn't just walk in anytime he wanted and use me as a stand-in daughter. Finn reassured me that there would be no alteration to the wedding arrangements and that he would make sure Dad knew about it. I haven't spoken to one of them since last evening. I'm getting so anxious about it. I truly don't have the energy to handle this turmoil at this time, and everything was going smoothly. I'm not sure if I should get in touch with them or hold off until I find out what transpired between Finn and Dad. I'm not even sure whether Finn has had a conversation with him yet. The anxiousness is making me queasy, and I'm at a loss for what to do. Update 1. Finn and I eventually spoke, and the situation is a complete mess, even worse than I had anticipated. Fortunately, he has taken care of the majority of it, so I won't have any issues. Finn claimed that he had been expecting a call from Dad to talk about the alleged change in plans, but the call never arrived. Finn recognized then that Dad was not going to talk about anything. Dad reasoned that since he had made the decision to accompany me down the aisle, everyone else must have agreed. After waiting a day for Dad to get in touch, Finn called him. Because I had mentioned something, he asked Dad if the arrangements had changed. In an attempt to appear casual, Dad said that because Sarah would no longer be walking me down the aisle, I had requested him to do so. Now, Finn, the more reasonable and level-headed of the three of us, is typically diplomatic. I was shocked to hear that he went completely crazy on Dad. Finn claimed that since they both knew I hadn't requested Dad to accompany me down the aisle, he urged him to stop being so rude. Rather, Dad had pleaded for the part after his beloved daughter had turned him down. Dad was enraged to hear this. When faced with the truth or anything he doesn't want to hear, he has a tendency to react violently. Finn, however, told Dad to stop talking and listen for once before he could interfere. Finn stated that considering how he had treated me over the years, Dad should be thankful that he was even receiving an invitation to my wedding. Then Finn relaxed. He later expressed regret to me for snapping at Dad, particularly so near the wedding, but he said he was unable to control himself. Finn longed for Dad to see his true self and shed the mask he was wearing. Finn admitted to Dad that he had always given preference to Sarah and had, at most, tried to get along with Finn, but I was never given any thought. In addition, he brought up the fact that I had requested Finn to accompany me down the aisle. I had only asked Dad at first because of Finn's persistence. Finn stated that he had thought Dad would use the occasion to begin repairing our relationship, but Dad squandered his opportunity. Finn said that none of his kids liked or respected Dad, calling him a failure of a father. Because Finn wasn't a fair parent, he didn't respect him. He never made an effort to love me or treat me like his daughter, therefore I didn't respect him. Sarah also didn't respect him since she wouldn't have pulled the prank she did if she did. Finn went on to claim that Dad was the source of Sarah's conceited demeanor. After years of lavishing her with attention, he was now having to deal with the fallout. Finn claimed that since Dad had been throwing out his other children since they were born, it was only fitting that his favorite child would throw out his favorite. Finn told me that although he didn't remember everything because he had shouted in a blinding passion, he did admit that he had spoken more. He reassured me that I didn't have to be concerned about Dad pulling any tricks after he got a harsh reality check. And Finn would take care of it right away if he did. Finn also clarified that the plans remained unchanged. He wouldn't alter the fact that he would be the one to lead me down the aisle. I was more than grateful that he apologized for the drama so close to the wedding. I've never been able to defend myself with such strength in my life. I always believed that I might have done something wrong for Dad to not love me. Over the years, I made an effort to get over that emotion, but I was never successful. Here I had my brother standing up for me, which I never thought anyone would do. When we were children, my mother ought to have defended me, but she didn't. She never challenged Dad, but she made an effort to compensate for the lack of affection in her own manner. Her diffidence and deference to him gave me the impression that I would never be able to confront him about how awful he was to me, though I don't blame her for it. But only because my brother loved me so much that he could no longer stand the idea of my going through this did that change. I was choking when I told him that this was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever done for me, and I was crying by the time he finished recounting the entire episode. It must be the greatest thing I could ever hope for, but I doubt Finn understands the extent of what he has done. Second update, I'm married now. In fact, Kieran and I are presently enjoying our honeymoon in Thailand after getting married a few days ago. Despite some turmoil beforehand, the wedding went off without a hitch. Dad couldn't walk even one daughter down the aisle, and Finn wasn't going to back down. The situation has become really bad. Dad was primarily worried about how his extended family would perceive him if he did not attend the weddings of both children. During his conversation with Finn, he kept returning to this subject. Once more, Finn bluntly informed him that he was emotionally checked out with me anyway, thus he was missing the role of father at least for my wedding. Finn advised him to express gratitude for the invitation in the first place. Since Sarah was his favorite, Dad could only wonder what went wrong with her, and no one truly knows why she did what she did. When word came out, Sarah had the gall to phone me and claim that it was unjust to Dad and that I wanted him to walk me down the aisle because she couldn't. Since she was using Dad's money to pay for her wedding and had expelled him, I encouraged her to have a life. I informed her that I had visited Dad and that, due to some foolish pledge she was unable to keep, he had decided to accompany her down the aisle. She was more than welcome to change things up at her wedding if she was so offended by her beloved father's misery. Since she was feeling awful about Dad, I assured her that Arthur would understand and that I could even speak with him on her behalf. She ended the call since she had nothing more to say. Before the wedding, I called Finn and informed him that I didn't want to be involved in any more father drama. If it came to me, it was his duty to make sure I was finished with this bullshit. I couldn't allow Dad to ruin my day because I had 100 other things to be happy about or worried about. I couldn't allow him to ruin my most memorable day because he had already made me miserable for most of my life. Finn assured me that he would handle everything and that I shouldn't worry. It would be an understatement to say that I was really anxious on my wedding day, but fortunately, everything went smoothly. I'm glad Dad didn't try to start anything, even though he appeared to be rather glum. After a point, I was too preoccupied with having fun to give his pouty face much thought. It was awkward between them, and Sarah tried to avoid Dad as much as possible, but I didn't mind. I'm happy that nobody was able to ruin the wedding because it went off without a hitch. I could feel Dad glaring daggers at my back as Finn led me down the aisle, but that was all he could do. According to what I've been informed, Dad has been left to handle some damage control after a few people questioned why Finn was up there instead of him. That's his cross to carry, then. In order to live a peaceful existence and eliminate any possibility of turmoil, I also want Sarah's wedding to be over. I'm going to cut off communication with Dad for the foreseeable future after her wedding. In any case, I don't see the need to keep in contact with him. Update 2. Yesterday was Sarah's wedding. She didn't ask Kieran and me to the wedding, so I wouldn't know how it went. I'm not sure what she was trying to accomplish, but I was more than willing to watch. It was just Mom, Arthur, and Dad there, and to her dismay, Finn did not go either. At the last minute, Dad reportedly hoped she would change her mind and ask him to lead her down the aisle, but that never occurred. It was quite unpleasant, and it's clear from the pictures she shared that Arthur would much rather be somewhere else. Mom is just finished, Dad is glum, and Arthur is uneasy. I don't really care, but aside from that, her wedding went smoothly. I was called up by Mom to provide these details. Naturally, Dad is unhappy because he had hoped that at least one of us would give in and allow him to do as he pleases. Now, however, his personal life is in disarray and all of his children are essentially cut off from him. I don't care that he isn't handling it well. For being such a bad father to me, allowing me to have a miserable childhood, and even helping to cause it, I genuinely believe it serves him right. I've had enough of him, and I don't want Sarah's or his poison to affect this new stage of my life or my new family. I'm relieved they're no longer in my life.